I can just read through some of the protocol for remote hearings. Only speak when invited to by the chair. If you wish to speak, please raise your hand and direct all communication via the chair. Please ensure that your mics are muted when you are not speaking. When speaking, please be succinct and do not exceed the allocated time frames. If referring to any written submission, please refer to the specific page number in the agenda pack. Any new evidence can only be submitted at the discretion of the chair and the agreement of all parties. If you're having any technical difficulties, please use the chat function to alert the meeting or dial in using the details in the invitation. Please do not use the chat function for putting formal questions to the subcommittee. Any persistent disruptive behaviour will result from removal from the meeting. Once the application has been considered, any remaining parties will be asked to log out of the hearing. Please do so promptly so that councillors will have the opportunity to deliberate and make a decision. Each party will be notified of the decision within 5 working days. However, if you contact the licensing services the following day, you will be given a skeleton decision. Can I go to the first item on the agenda? Can we elect a chair, please?
Can I propose Councillor Routs, please?
Thank you, Councillor Sizer. Okay, I'll pick up from here then, if that's okay. So if we have a look at the next thing we need to do, it's to see whether we have any apologies for absence. Now, I believe that we have Councillor Ozen, who is going to join us later, but who is absent for the first part of this meeting. Is that correct? Have I got that right, Amanda?
Yes, Chair. I was
Yeah.
just going to clarify that, yes, Councillor Ozen is the third member, but unfortunately he's not able to sit on this item. So he will be joining members in the second and third applications. And also, Chair, I know we may have not had a chance to let you know, is that we would like to invite the parties on items 2 and 3 to come back at the relevant times that we say, which we need an hour for each application. So we would suggest that parties for item 2 return at about 3 o'clock or 3:05, and the parties for the third item to return to this meeting at 4 o'clock or 4:05.
Okay.
Okay, just so to save them having to hang on for 3 hours waiting for their application. Is that all right? Thank you.
You're a bit pessimistic there, Amanda. You seem to feel that we're going to take a full hour for everything.
Well, I don't know. We can always advise parties, but it's just that we're just making allowances just in case.
Yeah, I just wonder if you know, it's a bit hard to tell because sometimes
45 minutes maybe, if you want.
Shall we try for 45 minutes?
Yes, okay.
If we could suggest that anybody who's here for item 2, which is the Reading Lane application, comes back at 2:45, and anybody who's here for item 3, which is the Kingsland Road application, comes back at 3:30. Then we won't take up all of your afternoon looking at the other applications. Does that sound reasonable? Yeah? Good. Okay. With that in mind, I think probably, the next thing we need to do is just to ask whether anybody has any declarations of interest. That's Anya and myself. Do you have I don't have any, Anya?
I don't, but sorry, I've just seen someone else's hand up. I think Anne is trying to signal, but I don't have any declarations of interest, no.
Okay, thank you. Anne, what would you like to say? You're on mute, Anne, sorry.
Is that okay?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Steep learning curve for me. You were talking about apologies. I spoke to one of the people who responded, Roger Chesses sends his apologies. He was going to attend today. He may still be able to do it by phone. I'm not sure, but he's had an urgent family matter to deal with. Thank you.
Could you confirm for me which item that's with regard to?
He was one of the objectors to the application.
Which, with the first application you're talking about, are you?
So the first one, yes, the 57 Stoke Newington High Street.
Okay, thank you. Good, okay. Moving on then. Next item on the agenda is minutes of previous meetings, but we have none for consideration today, so we can skip past that. And so now, I think what I would tend to do is just get everybody to introduce themselves first, and then I'll go through the procedure that we're going to be using this afternoon. My name is Penny Root. I'm chairing this subcommittee this afternoon, and I represent Victoria Ward on Hackney Council. If I could ask Councillor Sizer about you.
Thank you, Councillor Sizer. I'm Councillor for Hoxton East and Shoreditch.
Good, thank you. I think probably the easiest thing for me to do is just to look at my screen and go along, I'm afraid, which might be a little bit haphazard, but does mean that we won't miss anybody out. So could I ask Mahir Kilic, please, to introduce yourself?
Good afternoon, Chair and members. My name is Mahir Kilic. I'll be representing the applicant. The applicant is next to me.
Hi, my name's Ken Mehmet. I am the proprietor of 57 Stoke Newington High Street.
Okay, thank you very much. Next on my list is Mark Agnew. Hello, Mark. Can you hear us?
Chair, I think Mark is actually observing from the Governance Services team.
Oh, is he?
So
Okay.
he's actually one of our internal officers. So apologies.
Right.
He's
So Mark is just observing. Okay. Suba, I wonder if you could introduce yourself.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Subha Sriram, a Principal Licensing Officer. I will be presenting the reports today. Thank you.
Thank you. And Amanda North.
Good afternoon, Chair. I'm Amanda North, solicitor from Legal Services, supporting members this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you. And Anne.
My name's Anne Chandra. I'm a resident in Hollow Road.
Thank you. And we've got on my screen Jim Solis.
Madam, I'm here for the third one, but my IT is not great, so I'm just going to leave it on and but not speak.
Okay, that's fine. Rabia.
My name's Rabia Hatun. I'm the governance officer.
Thank you. David Tuitt.
Good afternoon. I'm David Tuitt. I'm team leader, licensing and technical support. Speaking on the first item.
Thank you. Yukiyasu, I believe you're for the second item. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, so I'm speaking for Yuki from Botkai.
Okay, so would you like to stay with us, or do you want to disappear until 2:45?
I'm going to hang around in the background and just watch, if that's all right.
That's fine.
Thank you.
Good. Then we've got Robert Botkai.
That's me again.
That was you talking, was it? And Yuki is along with you.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Together.
And Hassan Aksu.
Hi, I'm here for the third item. I'll just be hanging up at the background.
Okay, so you'd rather hang out there so you don't miss anything.
Yes, please.
Okay, that's
Thank
fine.
you.
Mario.
Mario here from ICT support at the council.
Thank you. Mario's here to make sure that we don't fall off air. And I've got Robert Sutherland. Hello, Robert. Can you hear us?
Good afternoon, madam. I'm with the applicant for the third matter.
Okay, so you're going to sit in and stay quiet as well, are you, for the time being?
Yes, thank you.
Good, all right. So let me just explain how we're going to do things. We will, first of all, have the licensing officer introduce each of the three different items that we've got to deal with, so that we're all starting from the same base. Then the applicant will have 5 minutes to make their case. We will then hear from the representative authorities if they're making any objections, and from other persons if there are any objections that are being made. Any interruptions or questions that Councillor Sizer or I have for clarification, we'll ask in this period. But then once everybody has had their opportunity to make the case, then we'll have a little discussion phase. And then we'll round up with both sides having the opportunity to just say a few final words. And then essentially what will happen is that we will go into a private session to make our final decision, and the applicants will be notified verbally tomorrow, I believe, and in writing in the next few days. So is that clear? Does anybody have any questions about that? No? Good. In that case, we'll move straight on for Suba to introduce the first item for us, please, if you would, Suba.
Thank you, Chair. So the first item we are going to consider this afternoon is for a premises license under Section 17 of the Licensing Act 2003 for Cuts and Bruises Barber Shop, 57 Stock Newington High Street. The application is seeking for recorded music and supply of alcohol for consumption on the premises from 1900 to 2 a.m. from Thursday to Saturday. Environment Enforcement has withdrawn the representation based on the agreed conditions within the report, which is from 29 to 34. Representations remains from licensing and other persons. We don't have any other additional information, nothing else to add. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Okay, so without further ado then, we'll hear from the applicant. I'm not sure, is that Mr. Kilic who's doing the speaking, or is it the applicant himself who's doing the speaking to introduce?
We will both do, Madam Chairman. I'll be very, very brief. As your licensing officer outlined, the application before you is only for Thursday, Friday, Saturday from 7 p.m. until 2 a.m. following morning. That's to supply alcohol consumption on the premises and recorded music. The owner resides at the property, at the top of the property. It's a three-story building. There are no representations from environmental health. The representation from police is withdrawn with the conditions agreed with the applicant, that is namely employing SIA door staff at the premises. And only representation that stands, I understand, licensing authority, Mr. David Tweed is here to speak about the representation, which we may come back, and the residents. Residents' main concerns are not about how we're going to manage the premises, how we run the business. Their concerns mainly about what happens outside, what happens immediate vicinity or beyond our control area. This is not a club, or this is not a bar. This is I mean, it's not an entertainment venue where you will be expecting people dancing and, you know, consuming so much alcohol and causing noise and nuisance to neighbors. I'll pass it to Cam to basically describe what kind of premises he wishes to operate and he wishes to set up, so you can hear it directly from him. Yeah.
Hello, guys. So both committee and residents alike, I just want to introduce myself again. I'm Kem. I'm the proprietor of 57 Stoke Newington High Street. Basically, what I'm trying to do is create a low-lit, ambient, speakeasy type environment for customers to come and enjoy sit-down drinks, no vertical drinking or dancing. There will be no dance floor or live music. The cap for this is going to be around 20 to 30 people of a certain age range, which I like to think will not be causing a disturbance to the surrounding area or to my premises. I'm actually, as Mahir pointed out earlier, I'm actually a resident of Stoke Newington High Street. I reside above the shop, so I'm a lot closer than any of the residents that have actually put in objections. So it's in my best interest that it is not a rowdy establishment or place where people come and cause disturbances, as it will cause a lot more upset to me than anyone else. And also, I'd like to just point out the fact that I've, over the last 2 years, have around 13 or 14 tens where I've been doing private events, working with local promoters and people that want birthday parties and stuff in the basement premises. These have been for up to 70 people, and it has been live music at times, and it has been sort of louder DJ sets, and none of them have come under any objection or caused any nuisance for the surrounding areas or Hollow Road. So I'd like for that just to be taken into consideration as well. All of the events will be governed and by professionals, SIA and sort of bar professionals that will be able to manage a crowd suitably. And that's it really. I just want it to be a nice, something a little bit more regular than what I've been doing, as I feel like the basement is kind of just going to waste. But I want it to be a nice, calm environment where people can just come in and enjoy a few cocktails. There'll be 2-hour bookings for each booking of a table, so that we can keep sort of drinking and stuff to a minimum and kind of keep the turnover nice and healthy. That is all.
Thank you very much. Councillor Sizer, I wonder, have you got any questions for clarification at this point?
I think mine's more discussion than clarification. It'll be around the dispersal plans. So
Okay.
yeah, I can save that.
I'm just wondering whether or not you have a fire safety license for this basement and a certificate, not a license, sorry, a fire safety certificate.
Yeah, of course. The both first floor and basement level were equipped with fire extinguishers, fire exits, a map drawn. I think I had to apply when I did my personal license. So that's all there. Of course, there's fire safety, and there is also a dispersal policy that's also been submitted, I think, last week.
Okay, thank you. Could I just ask, with regard to the fire safety certificate, is there a maximum capacity listed on there?
I think the maximum capacity with the 10s was up to 60 or 70 people, which when the police came and viewed it, they had absolutely no objections, and they kind of saw everything they needed to see and gave it the go ahead. With, like I said, with the current project that I want to take on, it's going to be a lot less people, a lot easier to manage. Like I said, it's going to be up to no more than maybe about 30 people seated. So yeah.
Okay. Can I just clarify that 60 or 70 people, is that both the ground floor and the basement taken together, or is it just the basement?
So this was when I was doing the 10s things, not the current project, but yes, it was both floors.
Okay. Perhaps we'll come back to that a little bit later in the discussion, if that's all right. Good. Okay. In that case, let's move to Mr. Tuitt and hear what he has to say from the licensing perspective. David?
Thank you, Chair. My representation's in today's agenda at Appendix B1. So within that, I've made representation due to the hours that are being sought by this new license application on those days that we've heard, Thursday, Friday and Saturday. I'm just concerned that the proposed hours of operation could have a negative impact on the promotion of the licensing objectives. So we do have that core hours policy approach there, LP3. So the hours being sought are beyond those core hours on Thursdays, Fridays and Saturdays. As we've heard, the applicant has used a number of temporary event notices over the last few months. And those events, as far as I'm aware, have gone ahead without any issue. But of course, this is for a permanent license now. I have noted that the application is quite limited in scope in terms of the days of the week, but obviously the hours are late and outside of policy hours. And we have heard that the site itself is quite small in size. I do have a question about that because I think the applicant has said up to 30 people, but in some of the correspondence, I think it said 25. So probably might have to clear that up in the discussion.
Yeah.
But the only other thing to say, obviously, is seated. Those conditions have been agreed with the police, and that there's no music as part of this application. So I'll leave it there for now, Chair, and let the other persons be able to speak.
Just to clarify, I think that's no live music rather than no music at all. I think there's recorded music. It's going to be fine, isn't it? Mr. Tuitt, yeah?
I thought I was read. Okay, maybe we'll come back to that. I thought I read somewhere that it was no music at all. I'll come back to that.
I
Uh,
thought it was no live, but be good.
Background music, I think they said in their
background
paper,
music is
background-
in there. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So we'd have to clear it up as well. If it is background, then the recorded music wouldn't be
Needed.
would it be required as an activity authorised by this license. So if you're minded to grant a license, of course.
Can I just clarify from you then, if it is background music, is there any kind of particular definition of what counts as background music in terms of decibels? And if it is background music,
Yeah, background, just ambient.
if it is background music only, and it's obviously recorded music, we don't need a license for that even outside of core hours. Is that right, Mr. Stewart?
Yeah, so if the music is background, there's no sort of decibel limit or anything like that. The Home Office guidance talks about like the volumes, and it's kind of a subjective assessment really. So we often see sometimes a condition attached about music not exceeding a level that could hinder face-to-face conversation, but essentially music for entertainment, that music's out of volume to entertain the crowd, that's what's licensable. So if it is background, then it's not a licensable activity essentially.
Okay, thank you. So it's not entertainment in its own right, basically. That's the definition. Good. Okay, thank you. Right, now I think at this point we should probably hear from the other people who are represented here today. So if I remember rightly, I can't now see everybody on my screen for various reasons because I was looking at the document, so bear with me. I think that is just you, Anne, is that right? Or is there somebody else from your neighbourhood who's also here? I think everybody else is for the other items, so I think it's just you.
I think it's just me. There were half-term complications and assorted things, and I've told you about Roger. So
yeah. Okay. Well, I noted that you all live in the same street. Everybody who's objecting, so I imagine that you don't mind representing everybody else to some degree. So you're the spokesperson. If you could tell us what your objections are.
Okay. Can I just clarify? I mean, I did put in an objection, obviously, but I also have some queries. So do I raise that at a later point in the meeting?
Well, why don't you start off with your objections and then go with the queries, which will naturally kind of go into the discussion phase then. That's all right?
Okay, yeah, sure. And the stuff about my objections won't take very long. It is there's the applicant was talking about it is true. What we are mostly concerned about is what happens outside, for very obvious reasons, and we rely on the people who deal with that sort of thing to look at the stuff to do with the internals of the building and such like. It's the old things, the antisocial behaviour. As people gather in the premises, as people leave the premises, smoking inside. I mean, I think there is probably a smoking. There might be a backtick in these premises where people can go out to smoke. I don't know, but then again, that would affect residents there. It's the raised voices. Actually, we had it last Saturday evening. At where Hollow Road meets Batley Place, there was a group gathered there, very loud shouting, kind of bits of pushing and stuff. It's just it's the public. It's I don't need to go on and on about it. It's all the stuff that we know. I mean, people have had examples of urination and that kind of thing. So these were the main things. I mean, there are families. There are slightly older people such as myself. A lot of people have their bedrooms and stuff on the at the front of the house. So it's noise, antisocial behaviour, and the effects of that. And obviously, this is this will be by definition be after people have left the premises. I did have, shall I say a couple of the kind of query things I had? now.
Can I just ask you a question, actually?
Mm.
One of the things that came across loud and clear in the letters of objection that there were was that some years ago there had been some kind of a premises which was quite noisy and caused you residents quite a lot of trouble, which is in the same building that this application is for. Were you a resident in the street at that time?
Yeah, I've lived here for nearly 40 years. Yeah,
Okay.
I don't know that the stuff was emanating from that exact building. I wouldn't know about that.
Okay, okay.
But there was stuff in the environment in that part of the high street. Certainly, there were premises with a lot of antisocial behaviour emanated from.
And that's now decreased, has it, over the years since then?
Yeah, it's intermittent. I mean, as I say, we had this stuff on Saturday night, the sort of get with the car, with the lights flashing and all that kind of thing, and it does seem a lot worse years ago when there were certain premises were operating, and it happens now from time to time.
Okay, so you're basically concerned that it shouldn't slip back to where it used to be before.
Exactly. I mean, it was just horrendous. It was horrendous at one stage.
Can I ask a question? Has Mr. Mehmet reached out to you or anybody in your street at all before applying for this license? Has there been any kind of conversation or,
He put in the thing that we were welcome to go and look at the premises if we wanted to.
Okay.
Yeah.
And did anybody do that?
I don't know. I wouldn't know. I didn't go. Because I didn't go, but I don't know if anybody else did.
Okay. Right, now let's hear what your clarification questions are.
Oh, okay. Yeah, just a couple of things. About the 2-hour slot. I just wasn't quite clear about that, because in the information, in the application, it says that it is to do with, it's just like drinking and cocktails and things like that. It's not dancing and stuff. I can see like restaurants sometimes give 2-hour slots, but I just wondered how that was going to work with drinking. If people come in to have cocktails, if they book for 11 o'clock, do they then have to leave at 1 o'clock? I just wondered about the logistics of that. I think that was that. Oh, that's right. And also I wanted to inquire about the photographs, because in the information pack, they were given as not the actual space for reference. So I just wanted to clarify if that's the premises the way they are actually at the moment, or if that's what is planned or something similar.
Okay, that's a good question. So Mr. Mehmet, are the photos that we can see, are they actually how the bar is going to look, or how it looks at the moment, or what are they? And also I noticed actually that the plan doesn't really match the photographs. And I wondered, is that because the plan is essentially one of those where you sort of copy and paste some tables and chairs that just kind of go onto the plan, and they don't really represent how it's going to be? It just shows a seated area, or is the plan more representative of how the bar is going to look eventually?
So shall I start with the 2-hour slot thing?
Yeah, go on.
So the 2-hour slots, Anne, are basically there so that we can monitor the drinking and the environment, basically. So we give people, they know that they can only be there for 2 hours of, social drinking seated. And if it looks like they've had enough, we can move them on, or, it's just a way of us monitoring the crowd, and also supplying like a healthy turnover to the business. So that's all that's regarding. And
let me come back to you on plan matter. The plan is on page 39 of the agenda. It shows where the licensed area is and where the bar is located. Obviously, the table plan is not something that you are considering. The licensed area, if you are minded to grant the application, that's the area you will be granting the license, and obviously bar will be located where it is shown on the plan. But the seat plan can be changed time to time, and it is intention of Cam to have a seating plan as shown on the pictures that are provided.
But just to clarify, the photos that I provided were purely there for reference. They're there from a cocktail club in Whitechapel called Discount Suit Company, and that's where those photos are from. But the space, in terms of ceiling height and width and size, is very similar to the space, my space, which is why I've used them as like it's almost a perfect reference of what I'm trying to create in terms of like the seating plan and sort of the bar area and stuff. So those are not photos of my basement.
Okay. So I think that's clear. Are you happy with those descriptions? And can I just ask about the 2-hour slots? If I wanted to come and book a 4-hour slot or even a 6-hour slot, could I do that?
No, it would be 2 hours per booking. And like I said, it is there at our discretion, I suppose. It is there to monitor drinking and monitor behaviour. And also, like I said, to monitor the turnover of the business so we can allow more people to come in if they wish. It's common practice within most cocktail clubs and like drinking spaces and restaurants and stuff. I think it's more there just for turnover as well.
Right. Good. Can I return to something that was one of Mr. Hewitt's issues, which was the capacity down there? You say between 20 and 30. Actually, that's quite a big difference. 20 and 30, that's a 30% difference, if you like, in the capacity you're looking at.
But I think in the letter I wrote 25, and then I've just said 30. We can keep it at 25 if it keeps everyone happy. I mean, to be honest, well, once we go back to the planning and the drawing board and stuff, then we'll have a better number, which I'm happy to submit at the time. But I am looking to keep the numbers sort of as low but as healthy as possible. So around 25 to 30, I think, is sort of a good rough estimate for me to give you at the moment.
Okay. In that case, could I just turn to Anne for a moment and say, Anne, how do you feel about the numbers being limited to 25? Does that reassure you at all?
Well, I think maybe I saw 35. So I think the actual numbers, I mean, obviously 20, 25, 30, 35, you're not talking about like 100 or something. But that's, so it's, I think as far as residents are concerned, that's within the same, I don't want to say ballpark, but I think that's what I really mean, within the same kind of area. So, for me, the difference between the two maybe wouldn't, matter that much.
So you're not feeling reassured at the notion that there might be just 25 people there at a time?
No, not really, because I know, I can understand, what Mr. Mehmet is, his intentions, perhaps with the place, but it comes down to numbers of people late at night, early in the morning, coming and going, being happy, making it, making a lot of noise, and that's the issue really for us.
Okay. I hope I'm not going to steal Councillor Sizer's question here, but the answer that you've given about the 2-hour slots does raise issues for me about getting people in and out of the building. How are you going to handle that? And what was the dispersal plan that you've submitted to the police, which presumably they've seen? I mean, what we tend to be concerned about with dispersal plans is how people leave at the end of the night, so as not to make too much noise and disturb local residents. But it sounds to me like you're going to be having several moments of dispersal, and that could raise its own problems.
Well, I believe that the 2-hour policy is actually going to keep things, even though it may seem like there's a higher turnover of people, it might, I'm hoping the people aren't going to be leaving legless. They're going to be leaving quite sober and go on with their night sensibly. There will be an SIA doorman on the door to direct people to a cab office or to their Ubers and keep them sort of away from, Hollow Road and the other premises, the other residential areas around. But I think this just kind of comes with the nature of the business, and With all due respect to Anne, I think this comes with also the nature of just being off of a high street. As you said earlier, this kind of these sort of like big crowds or people gathering in areas that you might not want them kind of just comes with the territory of being on the high street. And like I said myself, I mean, I've lived here for the last 4 years on the high street itself. So, you know, not off the high street, on the high street. And I know I have to deal with it every now and again on a weekend or whatever. But, you know, you kind of have to grin and bear it to a point. It's never got so out of hand that there's been like big, you know, there's a police station right down the road. So the presence is always there and people are always very well behaved, even if they are sort of intermittently noisy from time to time. But I do believe it kind of comes, whether I'm granted this or not, this sort of atmosphere, being on a busy East London high street, just kind of comes with the territory. And I have no intentions of adding to the madness of that. I plan on keeping things as sensible and as you know, in order as I can.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Sizer?
Yes, thank you. I'm not sure that's really answered Anne's or my concerns in terms of dispersal. I think you're absolutely right. It's a densely populated area in terms of businesses and residents. But with that, then the onus falls on yourselves as the business owner to prove to us how you will mitigate any disturbances. And I do think, although yes, it's not going to be everyone pouring out en masse at the end of a night, that can be a bonus. But I do want to pick up Councillor Root's comment, which is that actually what you could have is potentially, and hopefully not, but potentially worse, in that you've got staggered coming and going. So I would really like to hear clarification on what the dispersal policy is, detailing it. And one specific area that I'd really like reassurance on as well is around safety for safety for women and girls in that area. What you don't want to be doing is adding to what's already a very busy, you know, nighttime economy. What can you do to mitigate that again? What will you do to add only responsible licensing to that?
Okay, before we come to that, I'm just going to let Amanda say something because she often has something useful from a legal perspective to add to the mix.
Chair, I don't know if it's worth you asking, just through the chair, if it's worth you asking the licensing officer whether or not a dispersal policy is needed for this at all, or some form of dispersal.
Okay, let's find that out. Mr. Tuitt?
I believe I had one already. I think Mr. Killich's partner sent that to me already.
Okay. You did say that one had been submitted last week, so
it was.
You're happy with this,
yeah.
are you? And you're happy with it, David?
Yeah, it's fine. Yeah, just yeah, it's.
Mr. Killich, what did you?
Yes, the dispersal policy was sent to the local authority on 1st of February. It's 2 pages document. Talks about, you know, what we will be doing when we get the last orders. It's lighting up the premises and staffing to redirect the customers for dispersal, glass collection, emptying glasses, and, you know, making sure neighbors are not disturbed. Those staff will be asking customers living quietly and directing them to bus stop or Minicap office 2 doors away from the premises. It's a very, you know, it's 2 pages document. It's very well drafted and it's been accepted by the police and environmental health team, noise and nuisance team. So it is there and it will be implemented. What I would like to say, Madam Chairman and members, I understand Anne talks about her experience. She's been residing at Holyrood over 40 years. We are currently at number 51 Stockton High Street, 2 doors away from Cam's premises. 53. I used to live on 55 Stoke-Newington High Street for 14 years, which is right next door to the applicant premises. The applicant's mother, Sally, used to run, Anne will know, Sally's hairdresser. Sally been there over like 40 years. He is son of Sally, Anne, just for your information. So we do know the area very, very well, and Anne experience is mostly, we talked about what she was experiencing from other premises, not necessarily licensed premises. We know Stoke-Newington High Street, you know, a few doors down the road, we've got White Horse Pub. A few doors, you know, again, 2 doors away, we got Spanish Tapas Restaurant. But the Spanish Tapas Restaurant and our clientele type will not be causing any kind of noise and nuisance to the neighbors. When there is a you know, public event going on at White Hart Pub, yes, we do get disturbance, but this is not that kind of, you know, premises. As Cam has outlined, it's only limited to 25 individuals, and you know, there are enough measures there, and I believe he should be you know, given a chance to operate the premises. If there are any issues arises, we will share our telephone number with another residents. If there are any issues arises from our customers, we can liaise with them, and we can make sure we will warn these particular individuals, and if they do not obey by, you know, what we say, we won't admit them again to the premises. So the premises, the application you are considering, sorry, the application you are considering is the premises is not currently operating. So don't think like it was operated and as a result it's caused lots of noise and nuisance. We got no objections from residents on this block at all, or residents
Well, the
from
reason for
across
that
the
may
road.
be, if you'll forgive me for saying so, Mr. Coach, the reason for that may be that Stoke-Newington High Street is a very busy street with lots of noise pretty much 24 hours a day, whereas the street across the road is a quiet backwater. And that's
But
so
on the right, on the
well, the
corner, we
two are
got
not
Upton
quite comparable.
supermarket operates 24/7. You know,
Sorry. Just to answer your question, Anya, there as well. I'd like to just draw back on the 13 or 14 10s that I have under my belt from the basement over the last 2 years, which I think David can confirm there, which you mentioned earlier. Those were all a lot more people at the premises, leaving at around a similar time to which I've applied for the license this time round, and there's absolutely no objections or complaints being made around those times, and those events there were much larger numbers of people leaving the premises well, pretty much at the same time. Some left earlier, but you know, pretty much at the same time the closing, and we managed to manage the crowd brilliantly then. This is going to be a fraction of the number of people, so I've got absolutely no worries, and I'd like to give you my full confidence that there will be no issues there.
Bearing in mind that I said we'd try and get finished before an hour, I'm just going to move on, if you don't mind, and ask in order of hands, if that's all right. I think David Tuitt put his hand up first. David?
Thank you, Chair. It's just to apologise. I think that just going back to that dispersal policy, I think it was only me that it was sent to, so I didn't forward that on. I didn't realise that. So yes, it's just to confirm I did receive that on the 2nd of February.
Okay, good. Thank you. So Anya, next.
Yes, thank you for the reassurance around dispersal, but I'd like to go back to the question around safety for women and girls, specifically thinking about, for example, Ask Angela, staff training. Will you have any specific staff training around spiking, etc.? This is an area that we want to see proactive support for.
I'm very aware of the Ask Angela.
Before you answer that, can I just take whatever Amanda wanted to say, then we'll come back to you if that's all right. Amanda? You're on mute.
You're on mute.
Sorry, Chair. I was only going to suggest that you check with the other person in attendance about what their if they had any views about these previous 10s. Did they experience any difficulties with them, given that they were higher numbers of people, etc.? So I don't know if that helps at all.
Okay. Anne, I'm not going to come to you unless you have something to say, really. And put your hand up if you have got something to say with regard to that.
Yeah, yes. Can I say something?
Go on.
It was what Mr. Mowat was saying about the 10s, and I appreciate what he was saying about having had these 10 or 12 or whatever over the last year, but that is, it's 10 or 12, and I appreciate what he said about larger numbers. But what we're talking about here is 3 nights every single week, and I I'm sure no one has complained. That's what he said. I mean, but when there was this just today night, I mean, I didn't do any. There might still have been things. I'm just worried of the volume of it. 10 in a year compared with 3 every week is a big difference.
Yeah, no, point taken, and that's why we're here today, really, isn't it? So let's go back to Mr. Mehmet then and hear from him on the women and girls safety, please, if we may.
Yeah, I mean, there will be bookings, there will be IDs on the door, recorded IDs on the door. The Ask for Angela policy, which you mentioned, I'm aware of, and we will have the posters up in the toilets and have people aware of that. But I just want you guys to understand the environment in which I'm trying to create, which is going to be that of more of couples, maybe your first dates, that kind of thing, or older couples that just want to enjoy a more peaceful drinking environment, something that's not that of as rowdy as a pub on a weekend, something that's going to be sort of a little bit more ambient and chilled out. So I don't think we're going to be having like big groups of guys coming out and that kind of thing.
Can I just interrupt you for a moment, because it's great to have recorded IDs on the door. That is very reassuring, actually, as is your attitude to Ask Angela. I'm a bit less happy with your idea that because it's a nice, chilled, laid-back atmosphere, that is necessarily any safer for women and girls at all. I think that you can have some pretty creepy lounge lizards as well. I would recommend that you think about doing the training that's available and is free, which would, I think, broaden your horizons about the threat that there is to women and girls.
We're happy to have a coalition for that, no problem.
Yeah, 100%.
And in particular with spiking, which is a really worrying and growing problem. So I wonder if we could make a condition, please, about the women and girls training, please. But we'd like to add that as a condition. There are a couple of other conditions I'm thinking about as well. Before we get to me suggesting the other conditions, I'm also just wondering, I suppose the biggest concern that we've got is that, normally when somebody applies for a new license, they normally apply for 4 hours. And then what happens is that we see whether or not it's working. And if it's working well and you want to expand, then we normally let people go to, 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. I'm just wondering why you've decided not to do that in this case, to show us that you have a track record of being able to operate well and then go to longer hours. I think the other thing to mention, which I think it's worth you knowing, perhaps you haven't taken this into consideration, is that if we do give the premise a license until 2 o'clock in the morning, you may, despite the fact that you're obviously a local person, you may choose to let the license go, let the premise be to be managed by somebody else. In other words, somebody else could take on the same license, and they wouldn't necessarily have the same local connections as you. They wouldn't necessarily have the same commitments as you have. So what we have to do in this hearing is to make sure that the license that we give is pretty solid and sound, regardless of who the owner and the manager is. Do you understand? That's why you mustn't take anything personally. We're just trying to make sure that should you find yourself in a year's time selling the license on, that it will still be a functioning license for all the residents locally. Amanda, what did you want to say?
Yes, Chair. On the application, I see that it says non-standard hours. I don't know if you can check with the licensing officer whether or not we are okay to accept that, or is it something that the police still want taken off? Because normally we don't agree to non-standard hours because they like to manage those things themselves at the relevant times.
I'm not sure I understand. I mean, I've been under the impression that we're looking at going up to 2 o'clock in the morning here. That's what this application is for, which is a non-standard hour. It's outside core hours. So
no, if you can look at the actual report, it's got non-standard hours on the report.
On Mr. Stewart's report, you're talking about?
Yes, the licensing report. Yes.
Yeah.
I don't know if you want to check, because obviously everything that's on there will go onto the license if you are minded to grant it. So I'm just checking whether or not that's something that is accepted or not, or do we need to remove those?
You mean whether or not we're happy for it to say non-standard hours?
No, what I'm saying is the police normally don't agree to the non-standard hours, so I don't know whether or not licensing have a view on that or not, because the police have agreed conditions, but I don't know whether or not they agreed to keep that on.
I understand what you're saying. So because the police aren't here, we can't ask them. So we're wondering whether or not they've said anything to Mr. Stewart.
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry, Chair, if I could just come back. They've not said anything to me about that. Obviously, this applicant is entitled to apply for those hours. So I would just suggest that if you're minded to grant, it's given the same consideration as the hours for any other day in the core hours policy.
Police is happy with the hours we applied for, just to let you know,
Yeah.
subject to the conditions that we agreed with.
And to answer your question, Penny, about the 4 hours, applying for 4 hours first and why I've applied for longer, it's purely because I've been doing these 10s almost once a month for the last year and a bit, which have been granted at these times, which is why I had no thought in my head about applying for any less. I've been running events downstairs in the basement at those time periods. Like I said, a lot bigger crowds with absolutely no issues from residents or authorities. So I didn't think it would be an issue, but I wasn't aware. So
Also, Cam runs the hairdresser on the ground floor, and the basement is actually only from ground floor. You need to enter to the hairdresser and then go to basement. So during the day, it's not used. The basement is not used. Cam is managing the hairdresser shop during the day. So
and there will be this business and building is in the family. I've got absolutely no intentions in the foreseeable future to be handing the license over to anyone. It will always be run by me, and obviously
we'll create another issue though around planning, doesn't it? Which is that I don't know if you have planning consent for the use of it as a bar downstairs.
Planning is not a matter for licensing, you know.
No, I know that, but you don't want to be foul of the planning authority, do you? So I think I would, if we do grant this, even if it's core hours that we grant, we would want you to, we would put in an advisory that you should get appropriate planning consent for the use.
Of course. I think all planning both planning and actual planning has been put on hold until this has been confirmed, really.
Okay. Councillor Sizer.
Final quick question. Reassurance for residents is obviously paramount. So how can we ensure going forward there's a better line of communication between yourselves and the residents? And it looks like Anne has got a thought on that as well.
Well, like I've already put in the letter that I sent out on the 1st of Feb, I've invited residents over to the premises to meet me personally. I'd happily share email addresses or even my personal phone number with anyone that wanted it, basically. And if anything were to happen, they're more than free to welcome to me and take things up personally. And
I think it was great that you did an initial reach out, but I'd like to see something in place that's set in stone going forward, so that
I think it's up to them if they want to come to me and take my number.
No, you can offer. You can say, look, I'm willing to meet the residents quarterly. my
Yeah.
details will be. Yeah, no, I don't doubt that you would, but I'd just like to say that that should be a priority, really.
Okay, so send another letter out to.
I think we
So you
could
like
make it a condition.
A
couldn't we?
condition, I think.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I think we could make it a condition that you do some resident engagement,
Yes. Yeah.
which would mean that you could, I mean, quarterly is quite a lot, but maybe every 6 months you have you invite residents to come and
Yeah.
see you and bring any concerns that they may have. So maybe twice yearly
Twice
engagement.
yearly, but lines of communication to be very clear. So, email details, so that people know if things are starting to happen. Anne mentioned, Saturday nights disturbances. There needs to be something, so it's really simple to get hold of you. So that would be.
I think I'd be surprised if there isn't a condition already along these lines in the license. I can't remember if there is or not. Maybe Mr. Tuitt can tell us something about having contact details displayed clearly in the.
There is display, yeah. It's just being proactive with it. So yeah.
Yeah. Good. Okay.
Chair, I can't see that condition because I was looking for it as well to see if we're not duplicating anything. And there is something about displaying. It's not the contact details. So I just wondered if the applicant would be agreeable to having a condition to put their contact details on display.
Would that be all right, Mr. Mehmet?
Yes, of course.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Okay.
Condition number 19, it says a phone number for the premises shall be made available if required upon request to the police and any other responsible authority or any local residents to express any concerns caused by the operation of the premises. So, yeah, there's already condition number 19.
That's to be made available, though, isn't it?
Yeah, it's not on display. It's just made available.
Yeah, I think we'd like to have, what we'd like to do is perhaps on display to replace made available with on display. I think might be quite useful.
Are they okay? To
On display, on display being in the premises.
Yeah.
In the window. Yeah.
But I mean that means all customers would be able to have my personal information as
We're
well.
happy to make a post, send a post out to all the residents in the Hollow Road, share the phone number with those residents.
Those that objected can definitely can have my number, but I think to make it a public thing with my personal information, I think is not really
Well,
necessary.
I think what's common practice is that, I mean, it doesn't have to be your personal number. It can be a special phone that you have, so with a particular number, so that anybody who's got concerns about late night noise or antisocial behaviour can call that number. And then it could go, you could keep it if you're the duty manager. If you have a duty manager who's on, it's like a burner phone, if you like, you can give to somebody else when they're in charge of overseeing the behaviour. So it just means that there's somewhere that residents can always go to where they know that they can get in touch with somebody who's on site and supervising to sort things out if there's a problem.
Okay.
What about an email address instead of a number? If they don't want telephone number, they could do an email address.
I think both is best.
Okay, both are fine, yeah.
I think it's just like giving residents reassurance that there's somewhere to go if things aren't working out.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like,
come back to the hours again, because I'm still feeling nervous about giving you, you don't have a license at the moment. I'm feeling nervous about giving you a license until 2 o'clock in the morning. How would you feel about midnight or 1 o'clock? What would
I mean, 1 a.m. would be great. I mean, I completely understand. I wasn't aware of the you said first you applied for 4 and then 2. Like I said, I've my whole idea was do as many 10s as I can, see if even I like managing them, and see how the premises reacts, how residents react, how the high street handles with the 10s that I've done at much larger numbers, and see it works. And that was my sort of the rehearsal, let's say, to then come to this project and this idea now and have a lot less numbers, a lot calmer situations in the basement, and it's kind of like, yeah, I know I can handle it, which is why I applied for it. So yeah, I didn't mean to step out of line with my request, but yeah, 1 a.m. would be perfect.
Okay, I mean, I'll tell you one of the things that can happen. Managing a 10s thing is good, and you can get yourself all prepared and you can get in your extra staff and what have you, and you're coping with it all fine. I think there's a difference between the relentlessness, if you like, of week in, week out, having to manage it to an acceptable standard regularly. And, you know, with all due respect, you haven't had that experience yet, which is why I'm nervous about giving you a license until 2 o'clock in the morning, right from the off. But it's good to hear that you'd be happy with 1 o'clock. And, you know, I mean, everything that you're saying seems to indicate to us that you're responsible and willing to learn and willing to take on board some of the issues that we're raising. And what would you like to say?
Again, it was just in relation to the hours thing. I think part of the issue is, you know, is 2 o'clock. I think that could make a difference to some residents. You know, if the hours were put to say midnight, you know, I don't think it would be so, you know, so awful for residents. I think it could be more acceptable.
And if we were to look at midnight on a Thursday and 1 o'clock on a Friday and Saturday, how would you think residents would feel about that?
I think the difference between 1 o'clock and 2 o'clock is, you know, I don't know. I don't know. I really don't. I don't know. I don't know. I mean, personally, I think midnight would be a more appropriate kind of time. You know, it's still quite late. Once you get into 1 o'clock, then it's dragging on to kind of people dispersing at 1:30 and it's going on and on and on kind of thing. But, you know, we do, and I take, you know, Mr. point. You know, we live where we live, and we live here because we want to live here. We don't want to go and live in the country somewhere. But at the same time, you know, that it needs, you know, to be kind of give and take, and we don't expect stuff to be horribly silent and quiet 24/7. We don't.
There's just one other condition I'd like to explore before we finish, because I think we're pretty much reaching the end here. I would quite like to see a limit down in the basement there of 25. So that would be your limit, which I think would also help to reassure residents about noise and dispersal and what have you. Is that something you can accept?
I mean, I think it would really depend on the final planning of how the seating arrangement is down there. I'd obviously like to keep the numbers around 25 to 30 capacity. I personally don't really think that there's too much of a difference between the two. Obviously, I'm doing this for revenue purposes, so the more people I can see, the better.
All right.
And I'm happy to do all the training and to limit the times and stuff, but I really feel like I do have the experience when it comes to people management and the dispersal of the crowd. I know you're saying it's not a you know, my experience isn't a regularity, but it is there. And I've had absolutely no issue. I feel like if there were going to be any issues and any objections, it would have been off of the 13 or 14 10s that I've had. So I really feel like there isn't too much need to squeeze anymore. But
I think what we would definitely, I think, want a condition in there saying maximum of 30. But I would actually quite like to have that agreed with licensing once you've got your final seating plan worked out. So, you know, if when you've got your seating plan worked out, actually you're comfortably seating 26, maybe we'd bring it down to 26 and you could agree about that with licensing. So, I mean, it's a sort of absolute maximum of 30, but with a view to perhaps less once you've got your seating plan worked out. How would that be?
Yeah, I think once the seating plan's done and I've got an exact, like obviously given the license is granted, then there will be a you know, an architectural architectural design of the exact, you know, seating plan and space, which I'll very happy share with you guys for you to confirm whether it's okay, make adjustments where we need to.
Okay, so we're going to have a condition then to approve for licensing, to approve capacity once the seating plan is confirmed and submitted. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. And you presumably will do that in conjunction with applying for your relevant planning consent as well.
Of course.
Good. Okay. I think I'm finished. I don't know if anybody else has any more questions or anything to put in at this point, but if we could just ask everybody to have their final words. So I'm going to go sort of in reverse order. So Anne, if you would like to just summarize for us before we close the discussion on this. Thank you.
Well, I think you know, residents' concerns, you know, are fairly obvious, and there is, you know, I'm sure there will be, as has been mentioned. I mean, we know that the applicant's mother from all her years hairdressing and stuff, and it's, you know, part of the local community and stuff, and people are wished well. It's just a question of money, and as I say, I do think, if the license is granted, I think the conditions would be very important, including the hours that it would operate.
Thank you very much. Mr. Jewett?
Nothing really further to add at this stage. Maybe just a bit clarification on that last exchange about seating plan. Is the I didn't really I didn't get all of what that conversation was. Sorry.
Well, I'm going to summarise if I can, and no doubt Mr. Mehmet will tell me if I'm getting this wrong. At the moment, I think that the basement isn't yet fitted out, but he's still looking at how he wants to fit it out, and therefore he's not completely sure how many people he's going to be able to seat comfortably down there. What we want to do is to have a condition in there which says there will be no more than 30 people down there, but once he's got his seating plan worked out, he'll come to you and suggest what the appropriate seating would be that you can approve. Is that okay?
Yeah, okay. I understand. Yeah.
And you're happy with that? Good. Okay. Thank you. So finally, Mr. Killick and Mr. Mehmet, if you've got anything else to say to summarise, to wrap up?
Nothing. I mean, just to summarise, just to remind both Anne and the committee that I am also a resident of the High Street with exactly the same concerns as the residents of the High Street, as well as the upholding of the upkeeping of, you know, the personal license objectives and public safety of everyone that both visits and comes out of the premises.
Good. Okay. Thank you very much. We'll be deciding this later on this afternoon, and if you want to give licensing a call tomorrow, they'll give you an outline verbal of what we've decided, and you'll get it in writing within the next few days, if that's all right.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So everybody from item 1 can now leave, and we'll decide whether or not we need a brief comfort break and come back for item 2. Do we need a comfort break, or shall we carry on?
I can push on if that's all right.
Okay, let's push on. Now, have we got Councillor Ozen with us?
I've called him. He's going to join us in about a minute.
Is he? Okay. Right. What we might do, I don't really want to waste the time while we're waiting for him.
He's just joined.
He's just coming in now, is he?
Yes.
Is Mr. Killick still on here?
Let me just have a look.
I think he's gone. Oh no,
No, he has.
still there, isn't he?
Yeah.
Mr. Killick, are you still there?
Yes, I'll be spying on you.
Oh no.
Well, you're entitled to stay if you've got nothing better to do.
Yeah, well, I'll keep that on instead of listening to LBC. It's a lot more fun.
Actually, to be honest, now as I think of it, you're not entitled to stay actually, because you've got, as you're in this meeting, I think you can actually speak if you wanted to. So I think I have to ask you to.
I won't be speaking. I'll be just listening. I won't be speaking.
If you want to watch it, you can go and watch the live stream, and the live stream is available.
Oh yeah, sure.
On
Thank
the
you.
website. Is that okay? So I'm going to ask you to leave this bit of the meeting and go
Sure.
and watch
Thank
it on
you.
the live stream.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye. Okay. Councillor Ozen, are you here yet?
Yes, I am.
Oh, good.
Finished the other meeting. Yep.
Okay, in that case, let's ask Suba if she'd be good enough to introduce item 2, please.
Thank you, Chair. So the second item is again for a premises license under the Licensing Act 2003 for Yuki Trading Limited, Arch 426 Reading Lane, for late night refreshment and for supply of alcohol for consumption on and off the premises as stated within the report. Since the draft of this report, the applicant has submitted additional information in which they have removed the requirements for the late night refreshment and reduced the supply of alcohol hours from midday to 2300 Monday to Saturday and from midday to 22:30 Sunday. Environmental enforcement has withdrawn their representation based on agreed conditions. Representation remains from other persons. We have received additional information from applicant and the correspondence between the other persons, and these document has been circulated. And I have nothing else to add. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Now, let me just expand my screen so that I can try and see everybody here. If I'm correct, Robert Boktai is here speaking for the applicant, is that right?
That's right. Good afternoon.
And Yukiyasu Kaneko is the applicant himself, is that right?
That's correct, yes.
Yeah. Can I just ask, is anybody else here objecting to this particular one? Is this anybody here to object to item 2? So we have Carla Hill. And anyone else from other persons? Peter N. What's your second name, Peter?
Neckelman.
Good, okay. So perhaps then, if Mr. Kaneko or Mr. Boktai can begin by setting out the case for us, that would be good.
Thank you. Good afternoon again. Good to see Peter and Carla again. We met at the premises on Friday. This is an application for a very small restaurant. I hope that some of the issues that you've been discussing in the previous application won't apply here at all. We have a capacity of 22. Yuki, who is here with me, is a very experienced restaurateur and chef. The idea here is that it's going to be a small restaurant which provides natural wines and foods. It's not a pub. It's not a bar. It's not a sake bar. Any alcohol served will be ancillary to a meal. We've dealt with a number of the officers. I believe all of the officer representations have been withdrawn. There was one condition I just want to mention that's still in the papers on page 78, condition 27, which said that licensee should provide a safe receptacle for cigarette ends to be placed outside. That we didn't agree that condition, and the officer accepted that we didn't need that condition. We don't believe that there's going to be an issue with people smoking outside of these premises. I don't know whether you're familiar with it. It's just behind the town hall, actually. Under the railway arch, we have a right of way to the arch, but we don't have a right to use the space outside the arch. So there won't be any tables and chairs. There's no outside drinking or eating. Residents were concerned about music. There won't be any music other than background music. We were concerned about the hours. We've adjusted the hours quite considerably. So now we're looking at well, it's less than core hours, you'll be pleased to hear. So in terms of alcohol, it's midday to 11 p.m. Monday to Saturday, midday to 10:30 p.m. on Sundays. The residents have in their representation asked for a day off, if you like. If that's one way of putting it, that they don't want a 7-day operation. We discussed that, and we had a really good meeting, I think, at the premises with Carla and Peter on Friday. And it is our intention to operate 6 days a week, but we're not quite sure at the moment which 6 days. As a committee, you'll be aware that, as everybody else here, that the world has changed over the last 2 or 3 years, whereas what may have seemed obvious that Monday would be the day of closure previously, that's not quite so obvious now. So Yuki's going to be looking at that, and it's probably going to be Monday when he closes, but he's not sure, and we wouldn't want that conditioned, and we don't think that's proportionate to condition that, but we're happy for a note to be made that that is the intention here. So plenty of conditions on the license on the application. We've worked with the officers to make sure that that they are satisfied with everything. In terms of the smoking, perhaps this is my own view now, but there are far fewer smokers coming out of establishments such as this. It is a small venue. It's natural foods, natural drinks. We don't expect our clientele to be going out and smoking immediately outside. If anybody does want to smoke, they will be directed well away from the premises. We're conscious that we're very close to residential properties here. We want to be a good neighbour, and we very much look forward to welcoming them to the establishment. Now, since Friday, when we thought we'd made some good progress, Peter has sent an email with some further restriction on hours, which we don't think is proportionate here. We are within 4 hours at the moment. I think he's looking for, they are looking for a terminal hour of 10:30 Monday to Saturday. And the problem with that is we have to close even. So if the terminal hour is 10:30, that's very early for a restaurant. So we think we ought to be able to have core hours, a terminal hour of 11 p.m. At least in order to have a viable business there. The 1 day a week I've covered. In terms of noise, there won't be any music escape from these premises. I've covered smoking. And they've asked for a review with UP after 3 months. Well, of course, we'll have to do that. If you feel that it needs to be conditioned, by all means, a condition just as a one-off review, but we welcome Peter and Carla to the premises well before then. And if they had any issues, they would find UP there, and I'm sure it can be addressed. So I'm not sure it's really necessary as a condition, but it's certainly not one where we need a condition ongoing on the license. This is very small, it's very niche, and it fits very nicely with your own policy of wanting diverse establishments and interesting establishments within your area.
I think your
Thank you.
time's up there, Robert, unless you've got anything desperate that you want to say. No? Good, okay.
No, thank you.
And then and hear from Carla and Peter. Perhaps we could start with Peter, and then if you've got anything to add, Carla, then please come in afterwards. Peter?
Hi, thank you. Yeah, as Robert said, Yuki and Carla and Robert, we had a good conversation at the end of last week. In terms of the hours that Robert was suggesting, that we were suggesting additional amendments to, I think that the fact is that we spoke past each other a bit. So I think that Carla and I were referring to closing hours, where Robert was referring to times in which alcohol could be served. As you know, this sort of western end of Reading Lane, it doesn't have any other food and beverage establishments. It is primarily residential or solely residential. If you look at some of the other restaurants that are closest, you have Pigeon on Wilton Way, you have Lardo and Popham's Bakery on Richmond Road. Those are sort of three, mid to high level restaurants, which I think would be comparable to what Yuki is talking about opening. Now, all three of those close at 11 or earlier. I think Lardo closes at 10:30, and that's Monday through Saturday, and then there's earlier closures at Lardo on Sundays, I think at 10. So we are suggesting that there's a reduction in the opening hours, and therefore a reduction in the servicing hours. In terms of everything else, yeah, we also hope that there's not the need for a smoking area. We can't see how that would be able to be provided, considering the area outside isn't within the restaurant's ability to operate. We would hope that people would go around the corner underneath the arch or somewhere similar. It is very close to the front doors of a number of the buildings that are here. I think it's worth noting that we have 18 units in this building that opened in 2017. A lot of young families are here. We have 11 kids under the age of 11. So it is a very family-oriented place. We are not suggesting that we don't want a good establishment, and this is the type of establishment that I think that most of us would welcome. It's simply a matter of the operating hours that I think is the last item that we want to have a condition on. That's all. I'll pass on to Carla.
Thank you.
Thanks and good afternoon to the committee members and the staff and Robert and Yuki. Hello. Thanks for the opportunity to speak. There were a number of residents. Alison at number 12 has also. Can you hear me?
You froze for a moment. You said,
"Oh,
thanks for the
sorry."
opportunity to speak, and then you froze. It was all very.
I was just going to mention that Alison at number 12, because a number of residents did put in submissions. Alison at number 12 asked me to speak on her behalf as well, and we have been speaking with the other residents as well. And this is a very small residential building. As Peter mentioned, we've been here about 5 years. In that time, the arch has been empty. It was empty from the time that it was redeveloped, and it's not been ever had anything in there since we've all been living in there. It's a small and it's a quiet kind of neighborhood place. A lot of children, as Peter mentioned, and I think that was what led to some concern. And I think the other thing, on the communication, I think when we saw the notice, it was quite a broad application. And at that point, we didn't have a lot of information about what was planned. So I think the meeting last week was useful with Yuki and Robert to clarify what's planned, and a number of the concerns have been addressed. I'll just go through a few of the sort of the final points. One, on hours, I would support what Peter says. I think the concern here is, from the residents' point of view, is that 11 p.m. would really be as late as what we would want to see for the closing time. Whether that is the same as what the sort of stop time for the alcohol is or not, is not too much of a concern from our point of view. That's more of a kind of an operational matter and a matter for the committee. Second, on the days of operation, we appreciate the applicant's position on that. I think the day off was something that I put in my original submission. I think it is important. I think it's of less importance perhaps than the opening hours for us. The third thing, this was an important clarification that wasn't clear from the application, was that no outdoor space will be involved, and that was a key thing. I think, the understanding that the premises is just as outlined on the plan that's in the officer's report with the red dotted line, and that it's only indoors. The reason there was a bit of confusion around that is that the late refreshment license application actually ticked the outdoor box as well, so I think I was a bit confused about that, but that point has been clarified. The smoking area, I think if there is to be a smoking area, residents would like to be consulted on where that is located and the design of that, and particularly to avoid sort of residents and windows and balconies and things. The where it opens out, I mean, it sort of just looks like brick, but it's actually quite close to, it's within a couple of meters of people's homes, so it is quite close there. The next point was just on, there was a question about planning. I know this is not a plan, this is not a hearing about planning. The applicant indicated that they have planning, that it's an allowed use. The officers were not quite so clear to me about that, so I have asked the Hackney planning officers to provide some further information. Of course, if there is any planning, then residents may want to comment on that separately. And then the final point was just on consulting residents. It would be great if there could be a 3-month review, and if we could find a way to sort of stay in touch between the Great Eastern Buildings residents and Yuki. And yeah, we certainly hope that if it does go ahead, it's successful, but it would be great if it also had the right kind of hours and operating regime to make sure it doesn't interfere with residents.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Carla. Good. I'm sorry, I must apologise to Councillor Sizer because I forgot to offer you the opportunity to come back for any clarification questions earlier. So, Councillor Sizer, do you have any clarification questions?
No, nice and clear so
Councillor
far.
Rosen? Councillor Rosen, anything that you'd like to ask for clarification at this point?
No, I don't have, but I have few considerations I like to ask to later on.
Okay, so I think we'll just move generally into the discussion phase then. Shall we kick off with you then, Councillor Rosen? Did you want to make an observation in the discussion side of things?
Yeah, this I'm wondering about. Is that area? Is it in the LTN area? And then is there an access for the taxi or minicabs?
Robert, could you answer that, please? What's the access like for taxi and minicabs?
Sorry, I didn't hear the question very well. In terms of access to taxis, how would it?
He's wondering if it's in the
Can you hear me?
LTN area, and I think that if memory serves, correct me if I'm wrong, that you can get access from Mare Street by turning up Richmond Road and then turning right. Is that right?
No, not anymore. So it's in. I can answer
No.
if you want.
So what is the?
I'll just in response to this is a very small and local venue. I would expect most customers to be arriving on public transport rather than taxis, and if they needed a taxi, they would go to Mare Street. I don't think we're going to be inundated with taxis
I didn't know about
arriving.
that. I'm sorry. My experience is that people will be calling Ubers, and so I'd like to know how the Ubers are going to get in there. Carla, you're familiar with it because you live there. How are the Ubers going to get
So
in
it
there?
is in the low traffic neighbourhood. So I think people would either have to get access from Graham Road on Royal Oak and come around that way on Eleanor or Horton to Reading Lane, or as Robert says, people could, if they were leaving the venue, they could go to the other end of Reading Lane and go to the Mare Street end and the council building end.
Okay, so what the cabs would have to do then is to come via Royal Oak, and then which way would they leave? Would they have to turn around and go back the same way, or how would that work?
And more either Eleanor Road or is it Morton?
Horton Road, I think it is.
Horton, yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, right. I have I've got a question actually, which I don't know if the licensing officer may be able to answer, because what I was unclear about with this designated, again, Robert, I think you're being very optimistic that you're not going to have anybody who's trying to drive or to use Ubers, and they're all very environmentally engaged and using public transport. My experience is that that's the ideal, but it doesn't always work like that.
I didn't say no.
The same with smokers too, I'm afraid. No doubt it's going to be really healthy Japanese food, but also I do think that some of the clientele are going to be smokers. So my question really is to the licensing authority about a designated smoking area. If this premises doesn't have any rights over any outside land, are we able to have a designated smoking area, or do we just not have one? And we possibly don't have any rights to decide what that designated area should be. Suba, are you able to answer that question?
Sorry, Jack. Yeah, we can check with the applicant whether they want to have any designated area outside the premises kind of thing. But other than that, on the public pavement, I don't think so. We can kind of consider as such.
So basically, you could, I guess, encourage people to go to a particular area, but we can't have any kind of rights over that area because it's all public space, isn't it? It's not your own space. You're quite right. We do all know this area quite well because it's just by the town hall, and I think it is fair to characterise it as a very tranquil backwater, generally speaking. I'm kind of wondering if if you do have smokers who come along to the restaurant, whether or not just asking them to stand under the arch might be the best way, because that's furthest away from the residential area and also gives them a bit of shelter. I tend to think that if I were a smoker and I were going outside for a fag, that's what I would tend to naturally do. Is that something that Peter and Carla think is likely to happen? I mean, what do you think is, where do you think smokers are likely to go if they go outside for a quick?
I'd like to take your attention to one point. I like to highlight it. Under the arch, it might be very acoustic in the evening time, and then it might create, if people talk to each other, and then it might create more. What do you think? Would it create more noise?
I don't know, Carla and Peter, where would you like to see people directed to have a cigarette if you know, because it looks like we haven't got a kind of designated area that we can do. So
I mean, from my opinion, I think under the arch is probably the right location. I mean, we have Deliveroo drivers who often park underneath the arch and have dinner or lunch and have conversations under there. I don't think that the noise amplification is necessarily an issue. Obviously, if you have a larger party, but maybe that's something. I think originally there was a control of 4 people going out at once to smoke from the restaurant, and if something similar, then you can limit the numbers who go out under the arch, and therefore the amount of noise that might be created. But that area, that's a much better location than let's say that forecourt area that has access to the flats and to the Mews Street in the back.
Yeah. So, Robert, do you think that's something that we could just agree informally here without having to make a condition of it? Because I don't think we can make it a condition, really.
Yeah, I think that's sensible for informal, for any customers wishing to smoke to be directed to do so under the arch. But I wasn't trying to say that nobody would smoke. And I'm looking at the scale of this operation, and it's unlikely we're going to have 22 out of 22. But first of all, we may not be at full capacity, and secondly, not all 22 are going to be going out there to smoke. So the number of smokers is
it's going to be small, isn't it? No, I agree. I think we can move on from the smoking issue. I think it's a bit of a non-issue, really, unless Amanda's going to contradict me. Amanda?
No, Chair, I'm not going to contradict. Just a reminder that I think an appropriate figure for smokers outside would be 4.
Would be 4. Since we don't have a designated smoking area, I'm not sure that we've got any.
It would just be smokers permitted outside after 10 to be no more than 4, if the applicant would be agreeable to that, because if they're open till 10:30 or 11, that will be after 10 then, wouldn't it? So
it's already in the application as condition 9. Condition 9.
Is there a way of enforcing that if we haven't got a designated area?
I think other premises we have done other applications where it says at the front of the premises, so outside, because there's no obviously back area, I suspect. So it will be outside of the premises. The maximum number of smokers will be 4.
Okay. Is that a condition that you can live with, Robert?
I think he's referring to condition 9, though. He says
it's already there. I've got condition 19, page 77 of the agenda, the original agenda, which says that patrons permitted to temporarily leave and then re-enter the premises, e.g. to smoke. They might be doing shall be limited to 4 at any one time after.
Okay, so we've got that condition already.
That was already there. Yeah.
Good.
Yes. Okay. Great. Thank you.
Perfect. That sounds good. Thank you. Yeah. Do we have a condition? I don't think we do, but maybe I've missed it. Which asks for a sign asking patrons to leave quietly because this is a residential area. Do we have that condition?
I think we do. Can you just bear with me a moment?
Sorry, I'm trying to read it.
Yes, I've got its condition.
Condition
12 on page 76.
Clear and prominent
on page 76.
notices shall be displayed and maintained at all exits in places where they can be seen and easily read by customers, requiring customers to leave the premises and the area quietly. Is that okay?
I think that's fine.
Good. Fine.
Yeah. No, thank you for that. It's just it all gets a bit more complicated because the online agendas are different to the printed pages as well. So that's all sometimes a bit difficult to find these things.
Completely agree.
Councillor Sizer would like to say something.
Sorry, Councillor Sizer.
Hi, yeah, really quick question around the potential day off, and just wanted to hear from the residents what their thoughts were about it being a not set day, but it being open to variation. I'd like to hear your thoughts on it and then come back to the applicant, if that's all right.
I can start on that. I think it's a bit tricky, isn't it? Because the applicant hasn't has made an indication but hasn't made a decision, and I can appreciate that. I would say we can. It's tricky again. We can't if the license is for 7 days, then there's not going to be a lot of recourse if it's a problem. I think that's where consulting, having some condition around consulting and communication with the residents at Great Eastern Building would be a useful way to ensure that there's at least a mechanism for us to raise that and for us to be kept informed of what the plans are as they develop. I would say that it's there is quite a lot of concern, and I think among other residents, and they haven't come today, but Peter and I are actually probably the more moderate voices. So we have engaged with the applicant and we are reasonably comfortable, but there is quite a bit of concern, and there were quite a number of submissions. So there is, while I think I could understand it not being a condition, and if the committee wanted to go to the full 7 days, we would take the applicant's word and see how it worked. I think there is quite a bit of some reservations about how it's going to work in practice. So I feel a bit conflicted about that. I think it's less critical to me than the operating hours, the closing hours.
That's really helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Chair, I don't know if you would like to clarify that it's not enforceable for the council to put a condition on in respect of that closure 1 day a week. It is at the discretion of the premises licence holder to make that decision, and basically that all we can do is put an advisory note for them to consult with the local resident.
Okay, well, let's move on to a possible condition that we could include, and I'm just thinking. I mean, one of the things it seems to me is that if any restaurant, in order to plan its staffing, needs to know, I would say at least a month in advance, which days it's going to be open. So I wonder if the restaurant will be willing to undertake giving residents at least a month's notice of what its closed day is going to be. Is that something that you'd be able to do, Robert?
I've certainly never come across that before, and I was concerned about the legality of a condition of this sort, and I was tripping up that who would we have to notify? We have to try and run a business. It's not easy. It's not easy setting up a new restaurant. It's not easy surviving the first 12 months.
I'm just going to interrupt you.
If I could just finish this point. Sorry, if I can just finish. We are straying into opening times as opposed to licensed activities here, and the application is for the carrying out of a licensed activity, which here is the sale of alcohol, and not the actual opening of the premises. So I'd be very concerned about conditions that sort of prevented us from opening on any particular day. I'd just like to make the point I'm not trying to be difficult, but on the 6 day, 7 day point, it may be some reassurance that there is a mechanism to deal with concerns. So if we are open 7 days a week and we are causing disturbance and residents aren't able to sleep, they aren't getting any rest, there is a mechanism called a license review, which if residents come to us and we don't deal with their concerns, then they can come back to you and ask for the license to be reviewed and suspended or conditions applied, and that's really how licensing. So I'm not trying to teach the committee how to do that. I'm saying this for the benefit of really of Peter and Carla, that there is a mechanism there if we get things wrong and you are disturbed.
There is a mechanism, but it's one we'd rather avoid if we can, I have to say.
Of course, it's a weapon, it's a last resort.
So let's try
absolutely.
and arrange things today so that we can avoid that. That would be really.
But if we over prescribe it, we've had discussions with environmental health, the police, environmental enforcement. We've agreed a long set of conditions which are there to ensure that residents are not disturbed. I think if we over-prescribe for conditions and have to sort of consult residents as to when we open, with the best one in the world, that's not going to work. And I certainly wouldn't advocate that. I don't know just how that condition could be properly complied with.
Can I guess I just want to point out that, you know, we've already established that this is a very quiet area. And it seems to me that for the establishment to work well, you're going to have to get on very well with your neighbours. That's why you're obviously inviting them in and talking to them. So the condition that I was thinking about was not a condition about which day you're not going to open. It was rather a condition about regular consultation with those neighbours. And, you know, it seems to me that if you were to have a 3-monthly consultation, where you invite the residents down to have a chat, you know, during non-busy periods about how things are going and to raise any issues, it really probably would be quite likely that you'd be able to tell them which days you're planning to shut on which weeks, if it's not always going to be the same day. I mean, you may decide that it is always going to be a Monday, but, you know, I think what we're trying to do is to find an informal environment in which you can keep residents informed as much as you possibly can about your closing day, and they can make arrangements accordingly. Is that something that you?
I think it's a great idea, but not as a license condition. I say that because of my experience of dealing with license conditions over the years, where they tend they can be a little bit. 3 months goes by very quickly, and it may well be that residents don't show up or they don't want the meeting. I think an informative is a very good idea. And I'm sure Yuki, I can't see him because we're not in the same room. He'd be delighted to meet with the residents every 3 months or more often. But I don't think a condition that it makes it a criminal offence not to invite residents every 3 months is proportionate for this application, but certainly an informative recommending that there be regular contact with a representative of the residents. We can't write to everybody. But
you said days in advance at the last meeting. I mean, to be perfectly honest, I'm a bit surprised you're taking this attitude, because it's a condition that we put on quite regularly, and it's, you know. Anyway, Amanda, what did you want to say?
Chair, firstly, I'd like to say I agree with most of what Mr. Botake has been saying, in that we can't have a condition to restrict or you know, control how the license holder will open and close the premises. I completely agree with that, and we can't have a condition for that. But I do agree with you that a consultation or a meeting with local residents every 3 months is reasonable, given the concerns that there's raised. I appreciate that it's maybe not easy for the license holder to say exactly what days they're going to close on what days, etc. But if they can have that regular communication, or at least contact with a representative of the local residents of the block, then at least then they can convey the information to all the residents. So we're not suggesting it should be an onerous thing for the license holder, but they do. It would be advisable for them to have some regular consultation if possible. Thank you.
Councillor Sizer?
Yes, similar to what's just been said, actually, but I just want to reinforce that, again, the onus is on the new business to show willing to the residents around them, and so it's for me less important whether it's an advisory or whether we can mandate it, but actually I think the willingness needs to be there. I just keep thinking, if I was living near the new restaurant, the uncertainty of knowing which day it was going to be open or shut, I would find difficult potentially. So I think keeping those lines of communication open are really, really vital. And it's great to hear there was a meeting on Friday and it seems to have been largely helpful, but I think we need to keep on with that spirit rather than thinking, oh, we can have a license review at some point down the road. We don't want to have to go down that. We would much rather get things set in stone now that enable better facilitation. So I just encourage the residents' concerns to be first and foremost.
Thank you, Councillor.
I would ask that this be an informative, right? This is, again, I'm not
sorry,
trying to...
it's very likely to be a condition. And I would say that we can make the condition such that the residents and the licensee can agree to skip meetings. If we were to say every 3 months, if you decide you don't need to have meetings every 3 months, you can agree together not to have them. Equally, if residents are invited to the meeting and choose not to come, obviously the meeting doesn't take place. I don't see that there's such a problem about having, in an area as quiet as this, having a condition which actually mandates that you must meet with your neighbours regularly. Because if you're going to have a successful business, you're wanting to communicate with them. You're wanting to keep those means of communication open. And
could I just ask them
we can't guarantee that to the residents unless we make it a condition. If it's only an informative, we are not making that. We're not making that promise to the residents, and that's what I'm trying to do here at the moment. Amanda, what would you say?
Could we make it an invitation so that the license holder is to issue an invitation to a representative of the residents, rather than to mandate that we do meet with the residents? Because my experience of these conditions is that when where it's a well-run premises, gradually people won't turn up. So
it's fine that people don't turn up, isn't it? If it's well-run, what's the problem? If they don't turn up, they've got the opportunity to come. And if they don't,
we have to set aside space. We're a restaurant, and we're going to have to invite. We don't know how many people are coming. We're going to have to make space, perhaps not have bookings. So if we say that we will issue an invitation on a quarterly basis.
I'm really sorry, Mr. Bokhai, but I've never heard anybody make a fuss about this condition before. Normally, people are very willing to say, yes, we want to engage with residents, and I'm afraid it doesn't look very good to make such a big fuss about it.
I'm not making it. Okay. My experience is that we tend to look at these conditions 5-10 years down the line. As a petitioner, you say, well, what's happened to that condition? Oh, well, nobody turned up. So that's why I leave it. Obviously, it's your decision.
Fine, if nobody turns up, nobody turns up. And indeed, you can, if you find that further down the line you don't need the condition and the residents don't need it, you can get it taken off. Just as you're talking about having reviews, you can also have conditions taken off if they turn out not to be of use. But Amanda, sorry, what did you want to say?
Yes, sorry, Chair, I do think it's important for Mr. Bukate to check with his client that they're agreeable to it, because that's the important thing, that they agree to it. So I don't know if you can take instructions now, and also can you either he or one of the other persons who are present confirm if there is a representative who could, if that was a way forward possibly, or only for certain points of contact for them to then pass the information on, so that to make it maybe less onerous for them, if that helps at all. If they're not agreeable to that, then we'll leave it open to all residents then.
No, I think that we could. I mean, we do have sort of good communication internally within the Great Eastern Buildings, and we can manage that. We don't expect that that Yuki were to invite 40 people into the restaurant at the same time. So we can do a small management group that liaises with him.
Do you have a residents committee, residents association?
No, I wouldn't go so far to say that.
I think, can we not be slightly guided by the number of residents who've come along today? Nobody's actually had to physically move away from their computer to join this meeting today. And we have 2 residents here, despite the fact that we've had many letters from residents. I really don't think that, if you get 40 residents coming, then something's gone badly wrong and you need to take notice of it. I think that, it's a pretty simple thing, really, to organise, particularly since you're basically talking about one building. And I don't quite understand why you're making, why you're objecting to it so strongly. I don't think it's going to cost very much. I think it's a way of maintaining relations.
I'm not objecting. I'm trying to suggest wording that would work, which is why I suggested that it be an invitation to meet rather than for us to be mandated to meet. I'm not. I'll leave it with Amanda. I'm sure Amanda will word it so that it.
We can send you the standard wording, and you can tell us if you're happy with our standard wording. Which
Thank you very much. No, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sizer.
Yes, just want to reiterate that I think there needs to be, a focus on duty to support and listen to residents going forward, especially with any new endeavour like this. It's really important. So, yeah, I think that's got to be priority. And hopefully these residents will go on to be some of your customers anyway. We want to keep those, lines of communication open.
And, no doubt the days of the week that you choose to open or close and how much notice residents are given of that will be part of those meetings. So I think a 3-monthly meeting is sort of regular enough to be able to raise that on the agenda. And we can agree that it's not part of the licensing conditions or whatever. Can I just return to the issue of the hours? I think it's only fair, really, that we make the residents aware of the fact that 11 o'clock is our core hours strategy. So it would have to be really quite exceptional for us to move and to have to look at closing at 10:30. At the supply of alcohol, mandating it to 10:30 rather than 11 o'clock on most days. And I should also just point out that you mentioned Pigeon, Poppins and Lardo earlier, and the fact that they close at 11. They do actually have a license, all of them, to sell alcohol until 11 o'clock if they want to. Now, again, that really comes down to when they choose to close. I don't know anything about the way that they manage their businesses, but clearly, for whatever reason, they've decided they want to close at 11, and they do. It may be that this business decides that it wants to do that. Maybe there just is no business after 9:30, 10 o'clock at night, and it makes sense to make sure that you're closing by 11 because you don't have to pay your staff that extra hour. I just don't know. But I do feel that we would be more inclined to go in the direction of sticking with our core hours policy as things stand, unless you can come up with some really exceptional reasons that we should be taking into account. Carla, you've got your hand up.
Thank you for that. Just can I ask a question about that? Because I don't know what the policy is. The core hours policy, is that on the alcohol, the licensed hours for serving alcohol, or is that, and what's the difference between that and the closing hours? Because I think Robert mentioned that this is not about the closing hours, but obviously it's always, all the proposals are the alcohol and then 30 minutes after that for the closing time. So, and it's in the application. So it would just be good to know what the policy is before we try to say.
As far as I'm aware, and Amanda can correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that the policy is that closing is half an hour after the last sale of alcohol. Now, that doesn't mean that the establishment has to stay open until 11:30. It can, if it wants to, close earlier, in which case it will presumably stop selling alcohol earlier. Otherwise, it's going to upset people. But it would mean an 11:30 closing time. Yeah.
I'm not quite sure what exceptional circumstances we could come up with. I think it's more sort of in keeping with the character and feel. And I realize that the powers that you have may not sort of stretch to this instance, but when you look at those other restaurants in much more trafficked areas, perhaps it's hard to imagine it staying open that late. But I guess we'll see. Business will sort of drive the opening hours, I'm sure.
I think that's
Um,
probably true. I think when it comes to why we would tend to step outside of the 4 hours, it would tend to be, and again, Amanda can correct me if I'm wrong about this, it would tend to be that if a premises came to us at a review because there had been some kind of activities which made us want to review the 4 hours and reduce them, then we might consider it. But as a the core hours are there, they are what they are for a reason. And as we've all said, there are 3 restaurants which bear comparison with this one locally, which all close earlier than they're actually licensed to close. Presumably that's because there's no business at a certain time, and we'll have to wait and see what happens.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Amanda, what did you want to say?
Chair, everything you said is correct. I just wanted to refer the local residents to LP3 in the council's policy. Also, if you look on the agenda pack where it talks about our introductory pages, it has a summary of our policies there, and it does have a summary of LP3 there. I'll just read it out to you for your benefit, though. Mondays to Thursdays, 800 hours, that's 8 a.m. in the morning to 2300 hours in the evening. Friday and Saturdays, 8 a.m. to midnight. Sunday, 10 a.m. to 22:30. Do you need me to read that again? And the alcohol hours, the closing of the premises will always be 30 minutes after that. I hope that helps.
Thank you. Carla.
Thank you. That's very helpful information. I think just to respond to your question, I mean, I think the concern here is just the residential nature of the site and the hours of operation associated with that and when it's going to be open. We don't know what time, from a business perspective, the business will ultimately decide to run. But I think it's just 11:30 and a 7-day operation felt quite late. And there's been a bit of a, I think as also Peter said at the beginning, I think we were speaking slightly at cross purposes on Friday when we met, because our understanding was that we'd talked about 11 p.m. We just talked about 11 p.m. We didn't really make a distinction between the alcohol and the closing. But yeah, I just think it's the kind of the nuisance factor, I suppose, is it just gets later and it is a very quiet area. So the later people are leaving, the more impact that there's going to be on residents particularly.
Okay, Councillor Sizer?
It's just very brief, quick clarification. I think we've said no outdoor drinking. Is that right? It's just it came up in some of the residents' concerns. I just wanted to double check.
I believe that is the case, because I believe that since there's the restaurant has no rights over any of the outside space, they can't have outside drinking anyway. Carla?
I was just going to say that I suppose the other factor here is the kind of the feel good factor in terms of the relationship, and this is a new use. And yesterday Peter and I did write to Yuki and Robert and said that we would be happy and we would have withdrawn our application, our submissions yesterday, if there was an earlier closing of 22:30 on the alcohol and 11 p.m. closing on the weekdays, and then 10 o'clock on Sundays and 10:30 close. So I suppose that's just where the residents were coming from, is that felt like something. And again, not everybody in the community was supportive of that, but that felt like something that would be a good compromise and a kind of a sign of kind of good faith. But I think we couldn't quite get there in terms of actually agreeing that with the applicant yesterday. But that was the proposal that we put forward, was we would have been happy to kind of agree with that schedule.
Okay, thank you. I think ultimately it's going to be a business decision, isn't it, at some point, as to what is the most appropriate closing time, and to weigh that up with local concern. I think it's probably time to move to summing up, unless anybody's got a really pressing thing to say. So, perhaps I can just get any closing comments from Carla and Peter, if you've got anything else you want to say before we wrap this up. No?
No, thank you.
Oh.
Thank you.
In that case,
No.
Robert and Yuki, have you anything else that you'd like to add before we close?
Thank you, and it's been good seeing Carla and Peter again, and I'm sure that you will get to know Yuki better, and the neighbourly relationship will be a very positive one. And as you said on Friday, you indeed hope to be customers and to enjoy the restaurant. I just wonder on the hours, and you said that there would need to be exceptional reasons. I don't think we've heard any exceptional reasons to cut from core hours. Just again from experience, if you cut the hours too short, it's like the law of unforeseen circumstances that more people would leave at the same time. If for example it was 9 o'clock or 9:30, then you could have 20 people leaving at that time, which could actually cause more of a disruption to neighbours than people gradually leaving between say 10 and 11. But again, Yuki will look at. I too would be surprised if he's open till 11 o'clock every night, and I think you'll find that it probably will be a bit lower because of short because of the location. But I would ask that you give him the opportunity to demonstrate that this particular location and his operation won't cause you any concerns. I think we got there with the 6-7 days that you wouldn't be conditioning that we can only open 6 days a week, and I think Amanda addressed you on that as well. So thank you. I'll leave the wording to Amanda. I would be grateful to look at the condition on the 3 monthly meetings. I've seen those go wrong, and I'm sorry if it appeared I was objecting. I wasn't objecting as such. It's just the wording of it that needs to be careful, because I've seen these some of these conditions go wrong elsewhere. So we look forward to be part of the community, and I know that Yuki's very enthusiastic, and I think you'll have some really good cuisine there. I don't think it is just Japanese cuisine. I stepped into that one as well. I think it's broader than Japanese, but Yuki is Japanese, and so I think it will be a real interesting venue, and I look forward to trying it myself. So that's really it. Thank you very much for spending the time on this today, and again, thank you to Peter and Carla for investing the time in speaking to us on Friday.
Thank you very much. No doubt, being so close to the town hall, you're mindful of the fact you'll have no doubt some councillor clientele as well. Okay, thanks very much indeed. That wraps us up then, and we'll have a decision a bit later on today. So everybody who's linked to this item 2, you're free to leave, and I think probably it's a good idea just to have 5 minutes before we move on to item 3, just so that people can have a little bit of a screen break. Amanda, is there something else you needed to?
Yes, just to let you know that PC Briggs is running a couple of minutes late, so she'll be here in 5 to 10 minutes, she said. So
Okay.
just so you know. Okay, thank you. Thanks.
Okay, so now on my clock it's 16:05. If we come back at 16:10 for item 3, thank you. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Bye bye. Hello again, everybody. Right. I think we're ready for item 3. Perhaps we could just go through and have people introduce themselves, if they'd be so kind, so that we know who is who. I think we've already been through the officers here and the councillors, so it's just the other parties really. I'm just going to go through quickly the names that I've got on my screen, who we haven't heard from yet. So Robert Sutherland, could you tell me, are you here as another party, or are you here to represent the applicant? I can't hear you actually. Nope, still can't hear you. Can anybody else hear Mr. Sutherland or not?
No.
Mr. Sutherland, I don't know if you want to go out of the meeting, come back in again. That might sometimes do the trick. I'm not trying to get rid of you, but we do want to hear you if you're here.
Yes, can I just, pop up and say, look, I was hoping to keep, since you're streaming, hoping to keep anonymous on this particular meeting.
I think that's all right. Is that all right, Amanda, or not? I'm not sure. Yes, it is. Yeah.
Just point out I'm make the written representations at C3 in the report.
Okay, thank you. So you're an anonymous number, which is fine. Mr. Sollers.
Good afternoon, madam. I hope you can hear me. I've disappeared from the screen, but I'm a licensing consultant who's here on behalf of the applicant.
Good, thank you. Mr. Agnew, I think, is just observing. Mr. Hassan Aksu, sorry.
Hi, Chair. I'm one of the objectors in this
One of the
contest.
Okay. Then we have David Chewett. Do we have the applicant himself or not?
Madam, hopefully
Yes,
you can hear
we
me
can.
now. Madam, I'm very sorry. I must have pressed a button which I shouldn't have pressed, which turned the microphone off, so my apologies. My name is Robert Sutherland. I'm representing the applicant. The applicant, Mr. Toprak, is sitting on my left, the right-hand side of the screen as you look at it. And then the additional person, I'm going to turn the laptop round because there's only one laptop between us, is Mr. Kesey, who is here. Mr. Toprak's first language is not English, and Mr. Kesey will assist him with interpretation, and is also a business associate and has assisted him in relation to the setting up of this business.
Okay.
Hopefully that's helpful, madam.
Yes, that's all useful. I think we all know who everybody is now. Then, in which case, if I could get Suba to introduce, please, this item.
Yeah. So the item we are going to consider right now is for a new premises license under the Licensing Act for German Donor Kebab, 127 Kingsland High Street. The applicant is seeking information for the late night refreshment. Since the draft of the report, we have received additional information from the applicant in which they have reduced the hours. So the new proposed hours are from 2300 till 30 past midnight, Sunday to Wednesday, 2300 to 2:30 a.m. on Thursday, and from 2300 to 3:30 a.m. on Friday and Saturday. Representation remains from the police and from other persons. We have received additional information from other person as well, which has been circulated, and I have nothing else to add. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. In that case, it's probably over to you, Mr. Sutherland, to set out the case, please.
Madam, thank you. In respect of the application, the licensing officers mentioned the change to the times and also the additional conditions and an additional bundle, Madam, which you will have seen setting out a nighttime management plan. The purpose of this particular application is, with the increased costs that businesses are having to deal with at the moment, the short and the tall of it is that the business is not viable without being able to operate to a later time, hence this particular application. The reduced hours you've seen, that's on page 1 of the additional bundle. And thirdly, Madam, there's tighter conditions which are set out on pages 1 and 2 of the additional bundle. In particular, I would draw your attention to conditions on the second page, which deal with the cleaning outside of the area on condition 9. Condition 10, which deals with a host to be managing the customers, ordering, waiting, consuming, smoking and leaving the premises. And then additional condition 11, which deals with training, first aid, crime scene management, and also wave training. The fourth point, Madam, is that you've got a nighttime management plan that's set out at pages 3 and 4 of the additional bundle, and that deals with the control of customers, also deals with litter. The operation of that nighttime management plan can be seen, obviously, from Mr. Soller's report, and he deals with how the premises operates, and in particular, paragraph 1.2.13, he deals with the seating arrangements and how the process is managed. The sixth point that I would make in support of this particular application is the training, which is for the staff and the system that will be adopted in relation to signage, which informs people that they will be operating under the Ask for Angela system and will operate as a place of safety. The seventh point, Madam, is that the premises currently has a licence operating to lesser hours, but does authorise the sale of alcohol. Should this licence be granted in an acceptable form, then the condition 12, which is on the second page of the additional bundle, sets out that the licence won't be used until the existing licence is surrendered. And finally, Madam, temporary event notices have been in operation. We've also been in discussions with the police, and the management plan which is put forward has been based on discussions that we had with the police during the application process. On the basis of those 8 points, Madam, I would request that the application is granted and that the licence be issued on the terms sought.
Thank you very much. At this point, I'm just going to ask Councillor Ozen and Councillor Sizer if they have any questions for clarification.
Can you speak a little bit more about, you mentioned TENS, but I didn't quite follow what has or hasn't been used. So if you could talk about that a little bit more.
Madam, yes, the premises operated under some temporary event notices last year, and has also operated under temporary event notices during this month, and to the later hour of 4 o'clock. And the there are TENs in place to continue over the next few weeks. But the way that the premises has operated, other than that the hour has been slightly later till 4 o'clock in support of the original application rather than 3:30, the premises has operated in line with the nighttime management plan. So you can see from Mr. Soller's report as to how it operated, for example, last weekend, and what was happening, but when the premises was operating 3 till 4. You'll also see from the end of that report, there's a series of photographs, which again, you can see again how the premises is operated, so that because of the nature of the premises, they're able to keep really their customers inside when they're operating, and even when they clear the tables away from 2:30 onwards, then people are able to queue inside, order their food, and then wait and then leave. So there isn't any people waiting outside or causing any nuisance or disturbance outside, and they're able to manage it quite effectively in that regard. I'm hoping that deals with your question, Councillor Simon.
Thank you. Yes.
Okay, in that case, let's move on. Have we got PC Griggs here yet? Is PC Griggs here?
Not yet, Chair.
Not yet, okay. In that case, we will hear from, do we have a licensing officer? Sorry, I'm trying to...
No, it's the other persons.
It's other persons, right, okay. In that case, shall we kick off with the gentleman who prefers to remain anonymous, who has a telephone number?
If you wish, Madam Chairman, Madam Chair, I'll be happy to get on with that if you like.
Yes, please, thanks.
Okay, well, I've lived here 35 years, so I'm very familiar with this place. And well, 6 months ago, I was here when a similar application for this premises was made, and it was refused. And I provided you with the reasons for the refusal, which was a poor record of compliance from the applicant. I mean, I did read that no temporary event notices were submitted for the current calendar year in the report. This is an area of cumulative impact policy. There is a relentless impact of busy nights, and then also more activity on more quieter nights. And I just point out for the applicant that business viability isn't a relevant consideration for the determination today. This is a new premises license application. The summary notice I received from licensing, now I see the notes, I see the hours have changed yet again, but the application was a very bare application. And I note that there was next to nothing with that application until the last minute. In fact, I've questioned licensing about the appropriateness of receiving extra representations from the applicant within 24 hours of the meeting beginning. What you did receive was pretty much a last gasp attempt to give this application some respectability. We've got a paid for he's a jolly good fellow statement. And we've got a rather naive interpretation of the crime and nuisance situation here from someone who really doesn't have a clue what really goes on around here. There are some, if I may say so, some rather amateurish, non-exhaustive conditions, which are vague and lacking. And these will need considerable reworking on your time. The applicant seems to think that you'll grant him a new license because basically he thinks he's entitled and he's just being persistent. I don't think this is sufficient to discharge the obligations of the applicant in proving the worthiness of this application. It's very disappointing there is no officer from the London Borough of Hackney here to express a view today. And if you look at my original written representation, you'll see how concerned I am about the lack of supervision in the area, and the fact that none of the London Borough of Hackney's responsible authorities have made the statutory deadline, I think is of great concern. I would distinguish that from the Fire Authority, who confirmed they were making their representations, with the London Borough of Hackney representations, which just didn't do anything at all. I have to mention, I didn't mention this at the last hearing, but I think it's really appropriate to talk about the situation there was with the A board outside of this premises. I think it's just indicative of the attitude I've had from the staff management of this premises. So when this place first opened, I was walking past. I walk past this place pretty much every day, and just walked past it, and there was this A board on the pavement. As you can see from the photos, there is a very narrow gap between the front of this premises and the bus shelter. And so after half a dozen times past this, there was a member of staff there. I said, look, this is in the way. You shouldn't have this here. It's one-way traffic only. And basically I was told, well, it's all right there. I said, well, it's not all right there. You're not allowed to have an A board there, and it's in the way. And then I started getting rather aggressively questioned about who I was and what I was doing and what authority I had. And I was just saying, look, I'm simply a resident and I'm just trying to get by here. And this leads me to think that this applicant really does need supervision, and the London Borough of Hackney isn't providing that supervision. And if you look at the previous decision from the previous subcommittee, they took into consideration their lack of confidence in the management, and that they weren't confident that the applicant and their staff would comply with the conditions of their license. And I think that's that is definitely something you should consider. I've got to say there are other two similar kebab shops in the immediate vicinity, and both of them are a nuisance, and it just shows that this does not add to the diversity of the nighttime offer here at all. In fact, the applicant's argument is that you look at a kebab shop across the road and we should have what they have, and that's simply what they're saying. But this application would add to the cumulative impact, and it's not something the applicant has mentioned at all in any representation I've seen or heard so far. I mentioned the fact in my written representation in response to the application that we get these drunken crowds. They'll be split up, and we will have one going to this place and one going to the other place. They'll be shouting across the road. And I won't even get into the issue of the basement. Their direct supervision is required. The suggested conditions are inadequate and ineffectual, and they look like they've been made up on the back of a fag packet, and they're just window dressing. I'll give you my critique of them further in the discussion phase, but your legal officer will no doubt spotted the obvious flaws, failures, and uncertainties therein. The issue of capacity is there. Why isn't there a designated smoking area? The licensing plan looks very odd. The non-standard hours read very strangely. It looks like it's open till 4:30 a.m. It looks like there's 24-hour opening before Christmas. The management plan isn't incorporated in the conditions. There are subtle but very significant differences, and you'll notice that none of these representatives never want any conditions on the license. They always rather have some supplementary document that doesn't have any legal effect. There's no response at all from the applicant about my representations about passing trade. There's no specific conditions regarding the nuisance proposal for delivery vehicles. There's no conditions about waste management. There's no pollution controls, filtration or grease traps. There's no condition about not blocking the pavement or eating outside or in closed containers. The takeaway service is designed for customers to eat straight away outside of the premises, or standing up in a melee inside or outside. Mention the mechanized sweeping activity. That very much depends on how noisy that is, depends on rotor speeds, and that depends on the amount of litter. There's not only nuisance from passing trade, but there's a planned use of delivery vehicles, and especially two-stroke or diesel engines. the applicant has the burden of proof to demonstrate this new premises license will not add to the cumulative impact, and the representations made by the applicant don't discharge that burden. And unless you're prepared to do all the work yourselves in furnishing this application with all that's necessary after this long afternoon to bring it up to standard, you should refuse it. I don't see really any engagement prior to engage with the responsible authorities, other than the police who haven't arrived. And this place is already open beyond core hours, and the existing license has many more conditions. Finally, I'd just like to say, just listening to your previous discussions about, the other licenses, this isn't an area where anything goes. Residents live here. This isn't planning. This is a residential area. And I have neighbours with children. I've had children living here. They're grown up now, thankfully. But this is where people live here, and people are trying to sleep here, and we're entitled just as much to protection of the licensing objectives as anybody else.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I'm going to stop you there because I think you've had plenty of time and you've outlined your objections very clearly. Thank you very much. I think PC Griggs is here now, so I think we'll go to the responsible authority in shape of the police, if we may, for PC Griggs' comments.
Thank you very much, Chair, and apologies again. Had some technical issues this end after sitting in it for most of the time up till now. So apologies. Yep, police objected to this licence because, firstly, of course, it is in the Dalston Special Policy Area, and police would like to know how they're going to limit their impact on the area and not add to that cumulative impact, as we've already heard about. We were concerned about adding another late night venue to the area, and what is a busy nightlife. There's premises open late into the evening. However, I did meet with the applicant and his representative to discuss what he'd proposed. The original application was changed somewhat in that the basement toilets were then taken off, which I'm sure you've all heard about, which allayed our concerns somewhat regarding them, because we didn't like the idea of the basement being used at all. There were other measures that they then used or looked at to help, and say, alleviate some of our concerns. They've run temporary event notices, which I'm sure they've already mentioned, over the last few weekends, which have helped somewhat in that we've been able to see how they would manage the venue. So that has helped us. However, we are still concerned about the hours and going late into the evening in the area that is already busy. As far as I can see from the temporary event notices that they've run, they've run without incident. I've just been doing a quick check again. They say I've been checking each weekend anyway to make sure there was nothing following the temporary event notices. I've just done a quick check over the last couple of years. And crime-wise, there's nothing obvious that's specifically attributed to them. Although obviously there is that general impact that any venue will have on the area. So our main concerns come down to the fact that it is in the special policy area, and I think they've gone some way to helping mitigate some of their impact, but I'm not sure, and it's up to you, the committee, to decide what hours they should or shouldn't have based on what they have submitted. But I say our main concerns are on the special policy area.
Thank you very much. Councillor Ozen and Councillor Sizer, do you have any questions for clarification?
I don't have any clarification, but I'd like to hear from the applicants about their waste policy, delivery policy. Also, what will they say about what the gentleman was for the gentleman's concerns earlier? So yeah, I'd like to hear.
Can we leave that until the discussion?
Yeah, exactly.
We've got one other interested party as well to hear from too. So we'll move on to that in a moment, if that's all right, Councillor Ozen. Councillor Sizer?
Yeah, just very briefly, it's been alluded to around the activity in the basement, and I'd just like some clarification about what is and isn't happening at the moment.
Would you like that from the applicant, or okay?
Yes, please.
Can I ask Mr. Sutherland, please, if you could clarify what's going on in the basement at the moment, please?
Madam, yes. Before I continue, Madam, I'm not sure whether you were able to hear me earlier. I was apologising that I was sucking a lozenge whilst talking, and I'm not sure that that came through, but hopefully no one is offended by that. It's unfortunately that time of year when it's about the only way that I'm able to keep from coughing and whatever. So my apologies.
You're doing fine.
Thank you. In dealing with the basement, the premises, and I'm going historic here. You'll have seen from the license which is in place that it covers ground floor and basement. And the license has been covering the premises for a number of years. Mr. Toprak has taken over the premises from last summer, and he only has the ground floor and the part of the basement which is shown by the plan which has been submitted. You'll have noticed from the photographs, if I could refer you to the supplemental bundle at I think it's page 19, you can see a photograph of basically a wall, and that wall is where the access to the basement was and would have been, but has been sealed up. The basement access, which is shown, I think, in one of the objectors' photographs, I believe my anticipation is that it's from the operator Alibaba, that they've shown the access on Kingsland High Street. That access is completely separate from German Donner at 127 Kingsland High Street. And as I say, if you go down into the basement, then now you will come across the wall, which, as I say, is shown on page 19. There is no means of access to the basement at all. Mr. Toprak does not operate the basement, has not operated the basement since he's taken over, and has no access to the basement other than the part that is really back of house storage and WC. I don't know whether that deals with Councillor Sizer's particular question about the basement. There's not much more I can add other than we don't have control over it.
Councillor Sizer, are you satisfied with that answer?
I think maybe for discussion phase, I'd like to hear if the other authorities have the same impression as well.
Can I just ask at this point for clarity from PC Griggs? PC Griggs, have you got any concerns about breaches of the current licence at the moment? Has there been any evidence of that happening at the moment?
Not that's been brought to our attention, not that I've got on our records at all, no.
Okay, thank you. And Amanda?
Yes, Chair. Just to assist you, if you want, when you're getting clarification from the applicant, I'm not sure whether or not you covered the point about deliveries. As I said, they're a takeaway from 11 p.m. So if you want to get clarification on that as you go along. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, let's hear from our other interested party, who is, sorry, I've got to expand my screen again to see your name. Mr. Hassan Aksu, is that right? Yeah.
Hi, Chair. Hi, members. Well, firstly, I think previously we've been in this situation before, and it was under his Mr. Toprak's partner, the whole procedure. Now it's under Mr. Toprak, and I believe this doesn't change majority of the visuals because they are still partners, and they have been breaching the rules because after summer, they still carried on, after the refusal objection, they still carried on to open in the late hours, and witnesses are Hackney Warden officers out during night time. So they've had the evidence. I've got the evidence previously. I've sent it to the council. And then after, towards, I believe it was about November times, they started constructing downstairs, and they made a illegal gambling cafe, which is, I've sent the images are there. You've seen it on the portal, which that I believe they don't have a license for that. Secondly, they were operating 24 hours without licensing again, without no trading license for the basement. But my main concern that I'm here today for, Mr. Topright's partner, Mr. Garrett, has on the 25th of January, has came to my business across the road, Alibaba, and spoke to my business partner because he was searching for me. I don't know how he got the information, because the information we sent to council was confidential. And he turned around and replied saying that we can't get the licensing, we've been refused, and the reason is Hassan. I'm not the reason. I'm one of the reasons, but I am not the reason. The gentleman then started shouting in front of the public. So my business partner told him, look, just come to the office, we can nicely speak there, and you can tell if there's any problem or not. But he's speaking has turned to verbal violence. It was threatening. And then my business partner told him to leave the premises ASAP. But however, this gentleman turns around and goes to my father's business about 1 hour later in Haringey Green Lanes and starts these conversation with speaking, but then ends it with threat. And the threat is clear because I've got the CCTV footages of both businesses with the voice recordings. And I have sent the information to the local council, to the offices in the Wardeners in the High Street. Also, I made a statement to Stoke Newington Police Station because I'm not scared of myself. I can be threatened. That's not a problem. This doesn't change the world for me. But my wife is pregnant and she had a miscarriage before. And she is under so much stress and depression right now because she's scared for me because I turn around, I go home around 4 o'clock in the morning when I close my business. And now she's a bit anxious, she's paranoid. She had, as I said, she had a miscarriage before. The reason I'm here, how can you threat someone searching for their businesses, come into my business, threatening my partner, looking for me, go into my father's business and saying, oh, if Hassan carries on like this, and on the 15th of February, this conversation won't end nice for you guys. Come on, what world are we living in?
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Sizer.
Yeah, I'd like to pick up on that because there's two versions of even what's happening in the basement, let alone some of the other things. So I'd like to go back to Amanda Griggs and just see what the police are and aren't aware of. If you've reported threats to Stoke Newington Police Station, that should be recorded, that should be known about. So I just would really like some clarification as to what the police are aware of.
Thank you. Amanda?
Okay, yeah, I would say I was trying to look up what was going on as Mr. Axie was speaking now. There was a crime report made, but it has been closed, saying that there is insufficient evidence to secure any sort of prosecution and to proceed. So at the moment, there's insufficient evidence to prove one way or the other what happened with regard that allegation from the 25th, was it, of January this year?
Sorry, Mr. Griggs, I was never asked for the evidence, and I've got the evidences on my phone because I've sent it to the council, the same evidence as well. I'm just telling you what's on the crime report, and I didn't investigate it. It's got nothing to do with me. I'm just reading what's on the crime report. That's what it says. Okay, that's it's been put on. It was only reported yesterday, and it's been closed.
So it was Mr. Axie.
So it happened on the 25th, but it was only been reported, and the reports only went on yesterday morning.
So, Mr. Axie, did you go to the police yesterday about this?
Not yesterday. It was the day before because my partner, as I explained, she was getting really anxious at home. Because I don't care about, because everyone can talk. But when it goes to the family side, it's a bit different because, as I said,
I understand. Yeah. Okay, Councillor Sizer, you wanted to pop in.
That's okay. So that's one aspect. In terms of the police knowledge of the basement being used for gambling, again, that's quite another serious allegation. What's the knowledge there?
PC Groups?
It has, as far as I'm aware, it was discussed. I remember it being discussed at Officers Enforcement Group meeting with council licensing, and I'm sure it was this one. It was there. Somebody had made a visit, and there was no. Yes, there was. It was a Turkish social club, like we've got many on the borough, where they're sitting there drinking tea. There was no evidence of licensable activity going on. There was certainly no cash changing hands. They were playing cards, but there was no. They say that there's tons of these the social clubs around, but when there was a visit, there was no evidence of any licensable activity taking place. Not to say there hasn't been, or there might not be in the future, but at the time when a visit was done by licensing enforcement from the council, there was no evidence then.
But that does still slightly contradict what's been said previously, that there is no activity in the basement. It sounds like there is activity, whether we know of gambling or not. There is.
Can I just? I'm just wanting to be clear about the space down there, because what Mr. Sutherland told us was that there's just basically some storage and a toilet down there, and there's a wall and no room for any other activity. Now, that said, we've seen a photograph of the wall, and it's not really a proper wall. It's a bit of plasterboard, which is, you know, not sort of properly finished. So it could have been put up quite quickly. So, PC Griggs, can you shed any light as to whether or not that area was being used by this premises or not at some point in the past?
I believe the downstairs is used and accessed by a separate door to the right-hand side of the premises. If you look at the premises, there's a door to the side of it, and I think that's how you get to the basement bit that was being used as the sort of social club. If I'm,
okay.
I think,
and
it wasn't through the kebab shop as far as I was aware. There's a separate door to the right-hand side of it. I think I'm looking at it. Yeah, that I believe goes down to it.
As far as you're aware, that area, which may or may not have been used for gambling but has been used as a Turkish social club, isn't actually connected to the kebab shop. Is that right?
Yeah, that's as far as I'm aware, yes.
Okay. Does that help to answer your question, Councillor Sizer, or not?
I think so. I still am not entirely sure, but yes, let's move on from that at the moment.
Mr. Axu's got his hand raised.
Chair, I would like to, I don't know if you get it as a question, but you can get evidence from the Hackney Council nighttime officers. They've been even in there in December times and recorded it themselves. So they've got the evidence that they were trading as a gambling place.
Okay.
We can get evidence all up there.
So you're saying that Hackney Council officers do have some evidence that there was gambling there, and that it's connected to the kebab shop?
Yes, the lease is all one lease, shop and the basement.
PC Griggs has got a comment on that. Is that right?
Yeah, that may well have been where the information came from for our meeting, rather than the actual licensing officers. It may have been the enforcement officers that had been down there and relayed to us what they'd seen. But again, there was no cash changing hands, and there was no evidence of alcohol sales or anything like that. It was playing cards and drinking tea.
And Mr. Sutherland, I think it's only right that we hear from you at this point.
Thank you, Madam. Madam, the situation from the applicant's point of view is as I've said. There is no access from 127 Kingsland High Street into that area. The access is from a doorway, which I think is next door, was very close to being next door to 127, and certainly is nothing to do with the operation of the premises at 127. Mr. Toprak has his own lease for the shop, and that's the area that he has control over. Has not been involved in anything going on in the basement, is not involved with the basement, has no control over the basement. Purely, he deals with 127 Kingswood High Street.
So just to be clear, the basement area where the Turkish Social Club takes place or took place is not on the same lease, and it's not part of a lease that Mr. Toprak holds. Is that correct?
That's what I'm informed, madam. Yes. Can I also actually just make the point, and I probably should, because I note there was a comment made about the wall. The wall is there. It wasn't put up by Mr. Toprak. My understanding is it is. I accept it. It looks like a partition wall, but it is solid. There is no way that you can move it. It is screwed to the wall, to the floor. It does not move. You cannot get through it.
Okay, thank you. Suba, you wanted to say something as well.
Yes, Chair. It's just to clarify that licensing have received a complaint regarding alleged illegal gambling activities at the basement, and that's still ongoing investigation in regards to it.
Okay. I did see that Mr. Tuitt was on this call. I just wondered if, because really what this boils down to is there a connection between the kebab shop and the basement next door to it? And if there is no connection at all, then it's a complete irrelevance and we should stop discussing it. So I just wonder if Mr. Tuitt's in a position to be able to shed any light on that or not. If he can't, then we'll just have to move on.
I am still on the call, Chair, but I've not made representation. So just purely to answer that question, it's something we do have an allegation and we're investigating it. But my understanding of the premises is that the basement is accessed via a separate doorway.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Aksu?
Chair, I would like to say, if they have a separately, if it's got nothing to do with the premises upstairs, why is Mr. Toprak's partner coming up to me on the CCTV and the voice recorder? You can clearly hear that saying they couldn't pay the rent. That's why they had to sublease downstairs to someone else. So you don't have trading license for downstairs and you're subleasing it to someone with no contract. And that's clearly on the CCTV.
I wonder if I could just intrude on Mr. Tuitt to ask whether or not that is something that is all part of the investigation, if he knows anything about it. Because, you know, there's part of me that is starting to think that if there's an ongoing licensing investigation which is of relevance to this application, that maybe we should put it to one side until that investigation has stopped. Because you know, at the moment it feels like we're being asked to make a decision on partial information. Mr. Tuitt, I don't know if you can shed any light.
I would agree with what you just said there, Chair. It's a separate matter for investigation, separate legislation, etc. And can be quite complex circumstances. Investigations under Gambling Act 2005. So that sort of is the reason why it can take quite long to investigate these sorts of those sorts of things.
Thank you. And in the circumstances, Amanda, and so you've got your hand up, I would just ask you, do you feel that it's appropriate for us to continue this hearing whilst this investigation is ongoing, if there is a connection with the applicant and the business?
All I was going to say, Chair, was that I think part of the investigation is that we're having difficulty ascertaining exactly who's running what down there. There's nothing at the moment that makes it, from what we've heard and what's been said and we've been spoken to about the kebab shop, that makes us think it's them, but we don't know who's running the basement as far as I'm aware, and I don't think we've got much further than that regarding any investigation that the council are running. So we certainly haven't been asked to do much more, but they say we'll need looking at whether it can be separated enough to make a decision today. That's for you, Chair. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. It was actually Amanda North that I was thinking of putting that question to, but it's useful to have your view as well. Thank you. Amanda.
Sorry. We always get confused.
It's fine. Chair, you have done the right thing of asking the officers what their view is, and if you think it is something that will be connected to this application or impacts the for licensing objectives, then you should defer this application or adjourn it to be heard after the investigation. But if you feel that you've got enough information to make a decision, then you can proceed with this application. There is an existing license already, so technically, you know, the applicant is not prevented from operating. They can still operate on their current license, because they're asking for a new license, obviously with different hours, etc. Because they are asking for nighttime hours, you know, that is quite serious and a concern. But it's whether or not you feel this separate gambling section. I mean, there is conflicting advice in that on the one hand, they're saying, it's been said, generally, that there's a lease that's owned, both parts are owned by the applicant, but then the applicant saying that they don't have anything to do, they have no control over it. But then also separately, we've got an investigation that's pending.
And we do have various, it seems to me, we've got various different allegations about who may or may not have the lease and whether or not there is a connection to the business or not. That's what's concerning me, really. Councillor Sizer, what are your thoughts about it?
I think because it's in an SPA, I think there is an extra weight to prove that there is no cumulative impact. So I feel the better of the options is to defer, personally.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Sutherland, you obviously want to come in at this point as well.
Madam, yes. I think at this stage, and obviously if the committee are of the that they need more information in relation to the investigation, then in some ways it's difficult, I think, for me to push against that, given that the alternative may be that an approach may be taken whereby the application is refused. The concern I have is that this issue is raised, I will say, by a competitor who operates across the road, and I hear what he says, but he has a considerable amount to lose in relation to this particular application. I would ask that the committee proceed with it, but madam, if you feel that you need some clarity or need the local authority to complete their investigation, then maybe there's nothing I can do to persuade you otherwise. I would say that the review process is a process which works. If something comes to light, and obviously I would say it wouldn't, but if something came to light in relation to the operation of the basement, that information could well be used by the licensing authority, by the police, to review the license with a view to revocation or suspension, whatever is appropriate. But I'm not sure that I can assist you further at this stage, other than to say that that Mr. Toprak repeats to me that he runs and controls the kebab shop and has no control over what happens in the basement where the access to it is next door.
Okay, thank you. I have to say, the allegation that Mr. Aksu made was not about Mr. Toprak himself, but it was about his business partner. And I think that's one of the things that's concerning me, that we don't have absolute clarity about who holds the lease on the various bits of property, and really we should be able to have that, I think. I must say, I have to note that Mr. Aksu didn't go to the police until 2 days ago, which is obviously 2 days before this hearing, and therefore neither Hackney Licensing nor, as far as I can tell, the police have had sight of the CCTV footage which he is talking about. An adjournment would allow that to happen, and for us to try to bottom out the connection between the applicant for this and his business partner, and whether we've got anything that we need to worry about, really. I just feel that, as Councillor Sizer says, this is a special policy area. It's in that area for a reason, because there are issues of antisocial behaviour and crime in this area, and for us to proceed to make a judgment on this application whilst we've got allegations which have not been thoroughly investigated of potential criminal activities, which may or may not be related to the applicant, seems to me inappropriate that we should proceed just at the moment, and that we probably should adjourn until some of these investigations are sorted out. I would say that I would expect Mr. Aksu to make the CCTV that he's talking about available to the responsible authorities as soon as possible, because that may or may not form part of the investigation. Has anyone else got any other comments to make?
Yeah, if I may be so bold, Madam Chair, the responsible authorities haven't made any representations, at least the London Borough of Hackney. Responsible authorities haven't made any representations. Well, you're rather generous with Mr. Chewett.
Well, Mr. Chewett is investigating something else which appears to be related to this. So if we adjourn at this point, perhaps Amanda North can tell me whether or not Hackney may make some representations when we resume.
Chair, it wouldn't be possible for them to make any representations because they need to make the representation at the relevant time. Unless they submit it at the right time, the opportunity is actually not lost then for them to do that. Mr. Chewett was merely observing today, and I appreciate you only called upon him as the licensing authority, not because he's making a representation as such. So unfortunately, although he'll feed back to the report of the licensing officer to explain what the current position is with the premises, he won't be making any representation at the future meeting.
Okay. And PC Griggs?
Just checking with Amanda, presumably I could put any further comments forward on behalf of the licensing authority from the investigation.
Yes, the police can do that, and if the licensing authority wanted to feed anything to the police as well, they can. So that would be fine, but if
we can do it that way.
Yes,
if
but
anything of relevance.
The licensing authority can't now make one, because that would be unfair, because that would mean, for example, if anyone else wanted to make a representation, they can't then suddenly just submit a late representation. It has to be at the relevant time, otherwise it's lost. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Aksu, you wanted to say something else?
Yes, Chair. I just want to make some point that the reason I went 2 days ago to the police was because my missus was really anxious, because, as I said at the beginning of the conversation, the business partner turned around and said on the 14th, after the committee hearing, on the 15th, if we don't receive the good news, then we will start talking differently to you. So that clearly that was a threat on a date. So that's why my wife was
I think all of
that's
it,
why my wife was
is not.
So that's the reason I had to go for her.
All right. There's no.
I still say that I don't. Yeah.
I mean, let's face it.
No,
I'm
still saying my wife.
But anyway, that's not for this particular hearing.
As my last point, sorry to disturb you, but as a last point, I would like to say that this will proves that illegal trading, doing gambling, talking bad to the person, the gentleman on the phone, and so this shows that these people are dishonest. Dishonest
I'm
and
I'm sorry, I can't.
I'm sorry,
What I have to say
without
is
the tangible evidence what we are doing.
we're
we need
waiting.
evidence. So
Sorry, Councillor Rosen, do you mind?
I have said
police hasn't got evidence at the moment. I think it It's
Police
not like,
didn't ask me for an evidence.
okay.
I
Well,
have
but
I have
it's-
notified on my
I think
statement. If they
police
require,
people-
I've got the statements.
Okay.
I can email them the CCTV footages straight on there and then. But nobody was interested. But what I've done, you can research as well. I have sent it to the council officers. I have sent it to the licensing team. I've sent all the evidence through my emails. You can check them.
Mr. Aksu, can I just stop you, please? Because, I mean, the chair has been trying to speak. We do understand what you said. You've been given an opportunity to speak. On the next occasion, we hope that you won't come back with the personalised comments about the applicant. Although I appreciate, you know, there are circumstances that have arisen, that is not for this committee to consider. We understand, you know, you've had to make your representations, but please, you know, we don't want personal comments coming to you, even if you've got something's going on between yourself and the applicant. Or I do sympathise with the circumstances, but the committee can't be held responsible, or they can't get involved in the personal matters. And we ideally don't want this meeting to turn into a personal slanging match, please. Thank you.
No. I just wanted to inform you that was it. So
Thank you.
nothing else to say.
Can we just leave it then,
Thank you,
please,
President.
that at the moment, what we're looking at doing is adjourning for the time being whilst the investigation, which is ongoing, is concluded, so that we can really establish the ownership of the lease, the connection between the leaseholders and the basement area, and to decide whether or not there are any other further procedures of any kind against any of the leaseholders or indeed the applicant. I think, as we've already said, in an SBA area, these are of particular concerns, and I think we need to pause and allow those investigations and reports to be delivered before we go any further. But what I would also say is that everything that's been said and alleged in the course of this meeting today is exactly that. It's allegations, and there's been no evidence that we've examined in this meeting which establishes anybody's good or bad nature. So if we can just be clear about that, and pause for the time being and come back and look at this again in the fullness of time, I think that makes most sense. Okay. Yes, perhaps Mr. Sutherland, do you want to say something else?
Madam, I think the only point that I was looking to try and add, if I may, is that it's not open-ended. And whilst I appreciate that investigation needs to be carried out, what I wouldn't want is that this go off 4 months on end, and I would hope that we would be able to fix some reasonable amount of time so that we can conclude it. We can come back, and obviously a committee will have all the information in front of it and can make an appropriate decision.
I think that's an absolutely reasonable request. Amanda, what do you think?
Chair, unfortunately, we can't dictate how quickly they investigate. I'm not saying it's going to be open-ended for months on end, but I think it's you know, down to the licensing authority or the police to advise as and when they're able to conclude their investigation. So unfortunately, we can't give a fixed date by which this is all going to be done by. I think it would be unreasonable to do that, because we would then be putting pressure on the responsible authorities to do their investigation when we don't know what their commitments are, etc. So I think for now we have to leave the parties to liaise, the applicants liaise with the police and the licensing authority to agree how they can go forward and relist this hearing.
I do agree. I think that we can't set deadlines for investigations to be concluded, and sometimes these things are more complex. But on the other hand, I think that we do also need to make it clear to the investigating authorities that there is an application pending here, and it does have some business implications for somebody, and we can't just leave it hanging indefinitely. So if we could just make a note of that as well, that would be good. Thank you very much, everybody.
Madam Chair, just say one thing.
Yes.
These allegations have been made. They were made in response to the application. There were photos submitted, and I really think it was really incumbent on the applicant really to have dealt with this in a timely manner before this meeting. I only have, there are only a certain amount of hours in the day for us all, and this was an issue that needed clearing up, and all we had from the applicant was, as I say, a very last-minute submission, which was inadequate.
Yeah. Okay. No, I hear what you're saying, and you also have my sympathy because you've spent the afternoon waiting to see this hearing, and it's now looking like you're probably going to have to spend another afternoon doing that. I'm sorry.
Better than sleepless night, Madam Chair. But thank you. Yeah, no, I appreciate the difficulties you've been presented with. I don't want to harp on about the lack of the responsible authorities making any kind of effort here, but I think circumstances you'll understand how I might feel aggrieved.
I do. Thank you. I can't say who you are because I don't know, and I'm not going to read the number. Amanda.
Yes, Chair. Just for the benefit of the local resident who's phoned in, I just wanted to let them know that under this hearing is always operated under the Licensing Act 2003 Hearing Regulations 2005, and under Regulation 18, it says, in considering any representations or notices made by a party, the authority may take into account the documentary or other information produced by a party in support of their application, representations or notice, either before the hearing or with the consent of all parties at the hearing, which means that there's no time limit.
I get that, but it was the previous policy of the council to refuse anything within 24 hours. That was agreed by the licensing committee. There's been a change of policy without any notice, and I just would like to clarify if that is your existing policy now, that I can just basically dump a whole load of documents 5 minutes before a meeting and you're all right with that.
I don't think that's quite what's being said. I mean, I think that clearly documents do have to be submitted within a reasonable time before the committee comes together. So if anybody expects us to see them,
well, I think it'd be reasonable if you had a very clear policy on that, rather than just quoting the legislation at me. 24 hours I thought was reasonable enough, but as it is, it's really sort of up in the air.
On this particular occasion, we were all able to see everything with enough time to be able to consider it. So I think it's a slightly relevant thing. Amanda has got her hand up.
But I have to respond to it, and when there's a report, and I need to at least gather. It could be an awful lot. I mean, I've literally seen, reams of documents just appear, within 24 hours. That's bad enough, but in less than 24 hours, that really is just taking the biscuit.
Okay, that's your opinion. Thank you, Mr. Sutherland. Sutherland, you're on mute.
Madam, sorry, I was on mute and couldn't find the button. I do apologise. Madam, I've remained, I think, remarkably quiet in relation to the anonymous objection. There is no authority for the local authority to accept anonymous objections, and that's very clear from the hearing regulations. And I would hope that certainly by the time we come back, whenever that be, that the details of the anonymous objector are provided, because they should be.
Yeah, I wasn't asking for the authority, I was asking about the policy.
Yeah, I think we cleared that up at the beginning, that we are able to hear from somebody anonymously, and actually the anonymous contributor made it clear why he was contributing anonymously as well. So let's just leave it at that, shall we, for now?
It may be, Madam, that I misheard. I wasn't present at that time because I had to come out and come back in. If that was said, then, Madam, my apologies, because I certainly didn't hear it.
Amanda Noor.
Yes, just to clarify that all parties have seen all the objections that have been raised. We can't compel the resident to disclose their details, but you would have seen the actual representation in the pack. Thank you.
Thank you. I think at this point we should draw it to a close. We've all spent way too much time here now, and so we're going to adjourn this for the time being, pending the investigations that are ongoing, and we will, the councillors and I will now go into a closed session to make our decisions about the cases that we heard earlier. Thank you very much, everybody.
Chair, before you
I'm
go,
patient.
can I come in for a second?
You can.
Yeah. Will we get the report about lease, and then on the lease, is there any subtenancy or the leaseholder is allowed to rent the basement or so? Will we get any report on that?
I think this is something that we can sort out.
So see the connections or not?
I think we need to discuss this offline, actually, to see what sort of information we will be able to access. Amanda, you wanted to
Yes,
say
all I was going to clarify, Chair, is I'm sure we will be updated following the outcome of the investigation as to what the parties discover, etc. So I don't think Councillor Ozen needs to worry about that, because we will be given some form of report to ensure the committee to make their decision. Thank you.
Thank you. And Amanda Griggs, you wanted to say something too.
I was just going to say that, yeah, I'll make sure that some sort of report covering all these bits is submitted in time for the next hearing, so we've got it all, so we know what's going on.
That would be fabulous. Thank you very much.
Hopefully.
Okay, thanks very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.